Chapter 132. Professionalism. Jack's dark red electronic eyes stared at the hologram. The scars on his face seemed to have solidified. I came back from the deep blue world and holed up in the recycling stratum as a gang leader. I served as a hired thug for Quantum Corporation. Is that professionalism? Oh, ideals. It's desire. Jack knocked his own chest. To be the head of a miner in the deep blue world, mining tens of thousands of meters deep every day. Or to return to the big city, free and unrestrained, doing whatever you want. Anyone with normal desires would make the same choice as me. I paid a great price for this. I relied on a bit of luck to come to Xia City. Yan Yongbo was a bit surprised. He wasn't surprised by Jack's choice, but rather his attitude. Now wasn't the time to pour out his heart. He believed that Jack definitely had some other goal. So I'm very annoyed. I've been in Xia City for over 3 years. Quantum Corporation usually doesn't contact me, but there are always some people who support the business. I can go do what I like. It's very comfortable, until you came back from the deep blue world. Yan Yongbo raised his coffee cup and gestured to Jack. That's truly an honor. Jack laughed. You came to excavate the Stargate, right? Hee hee. If the second deep blue world succeeds, it will be a great achievement. But it has nothing to do with me. I've seen it for a long time. The Apocalypse Laboratory's androids will never have a chance to shine. Anything that can be mass-produced is a consumable for those people. There are no exceptions. The expression on Yan Yongbo's face froze for a moment. Jack grinned at him and spread his hands. Since it's a consumable, professionalism and whatnot is too laughable. You say that my mission is of the highest priority, but you probably don't understand. I've dealt with over 20 test subjects over the past 3 years. Every single one of them has been confirmed as a defective product by the laboratory. Do you understand what this means? Yan Yongbo didn't say anything. He drank his coffee. The raised cup perfectly concealed the changes in his expression. Jack didn't care. He didn't expect Yan Yongbo to respond in the first place. He had a stomach full of things he wanted to say. This means that this combat arena built on the recycling layer was originally a garbage recycling station. These test subjects shouldn't have any damned awakening. The value of their existence was to provide basic data that might never be used, and then naturally be destroyed. So, the test subjects are trash, and I'm the janitor of the garbage factory. At most, I can use their remaining value to have some fun. No one in the lab has ever paid attention to this place. Do you understand? Never. Regardless of whether the data I uploaded to the cloud is real or fake, the lab won't investigate it because they won't check it at all. I can dispose of any of my subjects whenever I please. In fact, I do it all the time. Yan Yongbo paused the cup of coffee by his mouth for a moment before putting it down. He faked a sigh and said, I think the laboratory will have a headache over the awakening of a defective product, especially Professor Li Wei. Perhaps this represents a major change in the direction of his research. And Jack, you're quite different from my impression of you. What did you think I'd do? Rejoice over returning to the deep blue world? Jack's bionic eyes seemed to ignite with fire. He used his finger to forcefully poke his head. The moment Rui Wen's ability awakened, the priority of the processing chip's mission was triggered. Do you know how I felt? The second half of my life that I'd planned for myself suddenly collapsed because of this accident of hers. Of course, I'll remember that among the elements that caused the accident, you had a part to play in it. You were the one who lured those 2 people over. 2 people. Yan Yongbo captured the key information, but he absolutely wouldn't take the blame for such a thing. Wait a minute, Jack. Do you remember? I told you to take care of the fellow in the off-road vehicle before receiving your reward. But what did you do? You paid in advance. And then, when I was providing fire support for you, that big guy was still alive and kicking. You definitely don't know how shocked I was at that time. What he was implying was that if you had taken care of your opponent earlier, the current situation wouldn't have happened. As for the so-called credit, to hell with it. After all, strictly speaking, if Rue Wen's awakening tonight was considered inevitable, then Yan Yongboi and Jack, who had caused new problems, wouldn't be able to escape blame. In reality, the laboratory would definitely investigate this matter if the matter was blown out of proportion. If it wasn't properly resolved, then Yan Yongbo would have to face an extremely embarrassing situation when the time came. He still wanted to talk to Jack at such a tense moment, which meant that he wanted to tie up loose ends. However, Jack had already deviated from this topic. Jack still displayed an extremely shocking frankness. Yes, I admit it. I paid the price for a moment of stupidity. Oh, you can record this sentence as proof. In any case, I've already said too much. Do I need to repeat myself? No, thank you. Yan Yongbo admitted that he already couldn't understand Jack. This fellow had turned into a madman with self-destructive tendencies just because he wanted to return to the deep blue world. This was a troublesome situation that he hadn't anticipated. No, wait. An emotional altered human. Where were the preset emotional templates? Yan Yongbo was well aware of the principles of altered humans. Overly deep modifications had already destroyed their thought, feelings, and the ability to coordinate their actions. It was like a bad band. Not only would it not be able to play a pleasing melody, it would instead become a noisy disaster. In order to overcome this problem, people had used a disc that had already been recorded to replace the role of the band. The melody in the disc might be pleasant to listen to, but it was also mechanical and rigid. There wouldn't be any impromptu colorful variations. From the very beginning, the altered human's emotional pattern had been clearly defined. Therefore, altered humans could become emotional, but it had to be a recorded emotion. It had to be an emotional rhythm that was played after the preset conditions were met. Yan Yongbo found it hard to imagine how stupid a production line would have to be to install self-destructive tendencies into it. Or could it be that this bro had been infected with a virus? Jack, are you alright? Of course. I've never felt this way before. From what Yan Yongbo could see, at this very moment, the glow in Jack's electronic eyes was clearly radiating a crazy flame. You should understand my position now. In order to leave the deep blue world, I can do anything. No matter how stupid or crazy, it's no problem. So. Chapter 133. Yan Yongbo raised his eyebrows and leaned back in his chair. It seems like in your eyes, I'm just a son inheriting my father's shadow, a second-generation rich kid with nothing to do. Jack shrugged. I'm just saying that you're much more comfortable than your old man. It's been over 3 years. Is Professor Yan Hong still in such a sorry state when faced with competition? Yan Yongbo didn't mind Jack's mockery at all. Instead, he laughed softly. No, he's even worse off. He's even starting to be marginalized. There's nothing he can do about it. His research ability is at that level. No matter how much data he obtains, it'll just make him toss and turn for 2 more days. It'll only get worse after that. Besides. After a slight pause, Yan Yongbo tapped his temple. I can't imagine how to make a deal with a dead man. Jack stared at the hologram for a long time before laughing hoarsely. I thought a sniper would blow my head off just now. How is that possible? I originally contacted you with the mentality of making friends. But Jack, your thoughts put me in a difficult position. You're suddenly telling me that you don't want to return to the deep blue world. If it wasn't for you, perhaps I would have already boarded the transfer plane. Assistant Yen, you're the source of my inspiration. Oh, ha. Yen Yongbo was amused by Jack's counterattack. He confirmed once again that this bastard Jack was indeed mentally unstable. His hint was very clear, all right. Jack. I came to communicate with you with good intentions. Are you sure there's nothing wrong with your brain nucleus? Yen Yongbo straightforwardly made things clear. His meaning was very simple. Whether it was the Apocalypse Laboratory or Quantum Corporation, a cyborg like Jack had to be treated as a consumable while guaranteeing loyalty. They could only use some technical methods. Like the brain nucleus implanted in Jack's brain. Apart from providing all sorts of advanced thought patterns, it also had monitoring and recording functions. If it was confirmed that Jack had rebelled, the laboratory had specialized equipment to destroy the function of the brain nucleus. Even if Jack didn't die, he would still become a psychopath with severe cognitive impairment. Yen Yongbo couldn't possibly cooperate with Jack without solving the problem of the brain nucleus. He would only be throwing himself into trouble. Of course, if Jack really did have such a method. Oh shit! Yen Yongbo's eyes suddenly widened in the next moment. Jack shook his head slightly and grinned. On his pale skin, a layer of dark red light was emitting from the clothes he was wearing. The surrounding air was warped by the high temperature of the flames. The wooden floor beneath his feet was also charred black by the flames and even ignited. The problem was that Jack's skin and clothes were not damaged at all, as if the flames were just an illusion. The dark red light passed through the screen and burned Yen Yongbo's eyes. His body subconsciously leaned forward. Ignoring the stimulation of the flames, he carefully observed the distortion of the surrounding air. After a few seconds, he finally came to a conclusion: format of fire. As you can see, Jack's body was still emitting flames. He squinted his eyes slightly. Although he was wrapped in flames, he was enjoying it immensely. Yen Yongbo was stunned for a long time before saying, "The modification you received, is it third-generation burner technology?" "No, that's not right. I've seen your information. Your artificial organ ratio has reached 55%, far exceeding the upper limit of the archetype format's 14%. Jack extended his thumb and forefinger, making a stretching motion. "Dynamo movement technology. Are you trying to make me laugh?" Yen Yongbo no longer pretended to be deep. He stood up and heavily slapped the table with both hands. "Although I'm a first-generation burner, the first in the world." "All right, thank you." Yen Yongbo practically gritted his teeth in thanks. Then he said, "It's true that I'm a first-generation burner. But after 90 years, for 6 years, I've practically always been at the Apocalypse Laboratory. I haven't fallen behind in every technological update. From the very beginning, when I simply ignited my life force, to the second generation and the exoskeleton armor, to the third generation's internal structural strengthening. Of course, that includes the fourth generation dynamo movement technology. Do you remember, Jack? I just gave you that deep sea Type 4 dynamo movement core." Jack moved his fingers and looked at the burning flames coiling between his fingers. He was like a child who had just received an expensive toy, unable to put it down. "The fourth generation dynamo movement technology you're talking about, is it the laughable result of your old man being led by the nose by others? That castrated version of technology that Quantum Corporation is so pleased with?" He raised his eyes to meet Yen Yongbo's cold and severe gaze. "My dynamo movement core technology isn't that complicated. It's just a proper application of the dynamo movement core. It's a crucial method to allow an altered human, no, anyone to become a burner." There was a moment of silence both inside and outside the holographic screen. Luo Nan was already stupefied from watching. He looked down from high above and witnessed the entire process. The large amount of background information overwhelmed him. Aside from the dynamo movement core and the deep blue world that he had already come into contact with, there was also the Apocalypse Laboratory, the excavation of the Stargate, and Yen Hong's current whereabouts. Unfortunately, they were all fragmented fragments. Wanting to piece them together was undoubtedly an extremely arduous task. And naturally, Yen Yongbo's current reaction surprised him the most. Luo Nan had seen Jack's format of fire before. He originally thought that this was a new technology that Quantum Corporation and the powers behind it had secretly promoted. But he understood from Yen Yongbo's reaction that Jack's situation was actually a special case. Now this was interesting. According to what Jack said, he was just the head of a miner mining in the Deep Blue world. How could he know all this? Luo Nan was racking his brains when he suddenly sensed that Rui Wen's breathing rhythm had become a bit chaotic. Some sort of external force had interfered with her deep and calm state, causing layers of ripples to appear. The source wasn't the interference device within her body, but it came from Jack. It came from Jack's format of fire. The hot wind assaulted, and the calm lake stirred with waves. It hadn't reached the point of surging tides, and the change wasn't particularly intense. But even so, Rui Wen's breathing still instinctively adjusted after a period of disorder. This adjustment wasn't to return to a state of tranquility. Instead, it was to harmonize with her current state. The rhythm sped up by half a beat. This increase in speed was inappropriate, and the interference pulses within her brain were thrown into chaos. She needed to increase the output and continue to restrain them, but the speed of the change was clearly a bit lacking. Luo Nan's mind suddenly perked up, and a bright light flashed. There should be a huge difference between a person's mental and physical state when they were asleep and when they were awake. There was no reason to maintain a fixed rhythm. The same melody had differences such as allegro and adagio. It was easy to imagine that Rui Wen's breathing would certainly be at a different rhythm when she was awake. Even her breathing would change during her normal life and intense battle. This made sense. More importantly, the source of interference within Rui Wen's brain seemed to be unable to keep up with the speed of the change in rhythm. And Jack had inexplicably gone crazy. He was tangled up with Yen Yongbo, and he simply didn't pay attention to this side. A golden opportunity bestowed by the heavens. Luo Nan stared at Jack. This fellow who had inexplicably gone crazy was still displaying his format of fire. Luo Nan was fully aware that the so-called flame was just an external form. The true source of power and interference was the archetype format. It was this thing that was completely at odds with Rui Wen's own rhythm and melody. Format, right? I don't lack formats. Chapter 134. The changes in the living room were split into two groups, but the blazing light on Jack's body drew everyone's attention to him, including himself. No one paid any attention to the unconscious Rui Wen on the sofa. The powerful heat radiation in the room also perfectly covered up the minute changes that were almost undetectable. Yen Yongbo had just recovered a little. He forced his body to relax and sat back in his chair. He placed his elbows on the table, and his fingers were still crossed. He lightly pressed the tip of his nose and covered half of his face, trying his best not to reveal too much information about his emotions. Jack, forgive me for still doubting your words. You know, I've been in the Apocalypse Laboratory for almost 6 years. Work subscription, chapter name, word count, price, crossover coins, balance, crossover coins. This book will no longer display a deduction notification. New chapters will be automatically purchased. Chapter 135. Luo Nan's soul body flew through the night sky, closing in on Rui Wen at high speed. Ink was 7 or 8 kilometers behind Cragburst. He was in the second echelon by relying on his flying advantage, but he was still pulling away from Cragburst. As for Cragburst, he could only bitterly follow behind Ink. And in other directions, He Yuan and the participating members of the society were converging from all directions according to the approximate direction and distance given by Luo Nan. The society used satellites as well. They constantly narrowed down the search area and marked out suspicious locations. Countless messages were transmitted through the hexeer, but not a single trace was left behind in Luo Nan's mind. Luo Nan's mind was already completely focused on Rui Wen. In the body of water, where his body and soul blended together, he set up his own format. That bit of soul energy that he poured and transformed into a tall tower that protruded from the water's surface. There were also dark chains that resembled giant pythons that swam inside and outside the pyramid, creating waves in the water's surface. Luo Nan wanted to affect and disrupt Rui Wen's rhythm, forcing her to change her tune and break away from the influence of the pulse in her brain. However, he did not expect that he would be the first to be affected. The rhythm of Rui Wen's breathing was like a clear and flawless body of water that could reflect all things. Here, Luo Nan could not help but feel that the format pyramid was excessively rigid. The heavily chained crow was excessively messy. This was a purely awkward feeling, but it forced him to make adjustments. Otherwise, even the erected format would feel crooked. This matter was not particularly difficult to accomplish, because Rui Wen was there as a standard and reference. Luo Nan made the stability of the tall tower and the vibrations of the chains tightly interweave. One was moving, one was still, yet they were coordinated and symbiotic. After several hundred adjustments, Luo Nan found an extremely stable and comfortable state. It was also an opportunity for Luo Nan to converge and harmonize his soul strength. Finally, a wondrous ripple formed in his soul dimension. It was extremely dense, to the point that it seemed to be moving, yet not moving, seemingly still, yet not still. Without even thinking, it spread out in all directions. Luo Nan's soul body quivered the moment this feeling flashed through his mind. It was as if a layer of formless impurities had been shaken off, becoming much more transparent. His soul seemed to be breathing, possessing the ability to exhale the old and absorb the new. This was the breathing of the soul, the rhythm of the soul. It was also this wave of vibration that swept past. His and Rui Wen's two rhythms clashed, and the water suddenly trembled and churned. The seemingly smooth shockwave actually had an extreme impact. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Destructive power. Right at this moment, the external stimulation suddenly increased in intensity, drawing Luo Nan's gaze outward. He just so happened to see Yan Yongbo's terrified and shaken face on the holographic screen. He can see it. Luo Nan's heart spasmed as well. But when he saw Yan Yongbo's pale expression, his exceptionally clear mind flashed with a flash of inspiration. He was suddenly enlightened, yes. He had built the framework of the altar, carried Rui Wen and the human-faced arachnid in a higher-level battle, experienced the breathing of the soul, and so on. He had made progress, and the extent of his progress had exceeded his imagination. At the very least, the consciousness he projected had already interfered with the material plane, causing the originally invisible soul energy to appear in front of others. Control them. Yan Yongbo didn't know why the archetype format he was familiar with would appear in such a strange form in front of him, but even a fool could see that something was wrong with Rui Wen. If something happened to Rui Wen, all cooperation would become a joke. Yan Yongbo warned loudly, but Jack didn't need him to do anything superfluous. He immediately activated the pulse switch in Rui Wen's brain. But just a split second before this, a wave of quiet undercurrent seemed to brush past Rui Wen's entire body, both inside and out. The precision instrument stopped reacting. Rui Wen. Jack's bionic eyes nearly ignited. His killing intent was like fire. And on the sofa, Rui Wen, who had been sleeping all this time, suddenly opened her eyes. Her figure bounced up in the next moment, and Jack's deep CEM field was activated at the same time. The sofa, which weighed over 100 kilograms, was lifted into the air and flung to the side. It heavily smashed into the French window between the living room and the balcony, shattering the glass with a bang. The cool autumn wind blew in, and the curtains fluttered. The surrounding residents were in a bit of an uproar. It must be known that it was already past midnight. Perhaps other places in Sia City were still feasting, but the residential area had already returned to tranquility. This kind of momentum was still too big. Damn it. Hold on for another 5 minutes. Backup will be here soon. Yan Yongbwa took the initiative to cut off the communication after he finished speaking, and the holographic screen went out. Jack turned a blind eye to this. He only had Rue Wen in his eyes. There were no obstacles between him and Rue Wen in the living room that couldn't be considered large. However, Rue Wen seemed to possess the instinct to hide in the darkness. She landed noiselessly in the thickest shadows in the corner of the wall. She didn't open her mouth. She didn't make a sound. She only spoke. Please turn the page. It was a cold stare. Jack lightly pressed his forehead to ease his surging emotions. Rue Wen, you plunderer who always destroys other people's dreams. Before his voice fell, Rue Wen's figure suddenly warped in the shadows in the corner of the wall. She launched a charge at Jack with absolute speed. But what was even faster than her charge was a cold and desolate edge that suddenly shone in the nothingness. Jack's deep CEM field had been present all this time, sweeping up practically all the furniture in the living room. But at this moment, Jack still let out a muffled groan. His body fell back, and he crashed into the entrance door. There was no light there, but dark red flames rose explosively in the next moment. The fiery light illuminated his face. Jack's ugly face was already covered densely with scars. Half of it was rapidly withering and drying up. There was a clear scar on his cheekbone that was still in the process of tearing. Half of his ash-gray bones had already collapsed. What came out from within wasn't blood, but flames. It hit. Even though Jack had already used the dual interference of the deep CEM field and the format of fire, he still wasn't able to block Rue Wen's edge. In fact, if it weren't for the interference, this strike would have directly pierced through his brain, a fatal strike. Luo Nan observed from above, seeing even more clearly. Rue Wen's ability was somewhat similar to Zhang Yingying's white rainbow. It was just that white rainbow was like a rivulet of clouds that coiled around a mountain. Its form was relatively fixed, and its edge was contained within. As for Rue Wen's edge, it was hidden within her own aura. It suddenly erupted, coming without a shadow and leaving without a trace. The sharpness was secondary. What it truly exuded was the flavor of deathly stillness in ice. Luo Nan actually didn't see the trajectory of this strike. Half of Jack's face was already finished. Rue Wen. Rue Wen, Jack's voice became indistinct. His body actually retreated even further. The home AI, which hadn't responded no matter how he tossed and turned, was as obedient as a dog. It immediately opened the door. By the time the door opened a crack, Jack had already crashed out. Rue Wen didn't make a sound. She chased after him, but the alloy security door rumbled shut at this time. It was locked, so it wouldn't be easy to open it in a short amount of time. 2 muffled bangs rang out at this time. 2 cylinders the size of cups were thrown in from the balcony at practically the same time. They passed through the shattered floor-to-ceiling window, and they passed through the living room with extreme precision. They were thrown towards the entrance door. Only 30 seconds had passed since Yan Yongbwa cut off the communication. Chapter 136. Grenade. Luo Nan's soul illuminated, and he could see clearly that the 2 cup-shaped toys were clearly military-style grenades. He thought back to the defensive grenade that had put Cragburst in such a sorry state back then. He thought back to the might of the grenade in this sealed environment. He was stupefied for a time. He could only instinctively warn Ruewen. His mind was blank as to what to do next. In the next instant, he saw Ruewen swiftly turn around, her feet speeding up as she rushed towards the falling grenade. Was he going to fight back like in the movies? Luo Nan's thoughts had yet to completely turn when he used his all-encompassing view to watch helplessly as the explosive power of the two grenades took effect. The outer shell warped, cracked, disintegrated, and finally exploded in midair. The details of the entire process were under his clairvoyance. It was so detailed that it seemed as if it was being played in slow motion. But the problem was that the explosion had occurred in the instant that Ruewen had sped up and leaped up. It had happened in less than the blink of an eye. There was no flying shrapnel, but there was a powerful flash and a loud roar, as well as a continuous flicker of electricity. A stun grenade and a pulse grenade. The power of the two tactical grenades stacked together was enough to knock down a ferocious tiger. The explosion exceeded 170 decibels, shattering all the glass in the room at the same time, including the windows of the surrounding neighbors. The entire apartment building was in an uproar. In the instant the two tactical grenades exploded, Ruewen had already completed her movements. Her entire body had already leapt into the air and was rapidly leaping towards the balcony. However, as the explosion rumbled, it was as if Ruewen had been struck in the head by a hammer. Her body that was brimming with tension suddenly lost its balance. The distance between the entrance hall and the balcony was a distance of 7 meters. She should have been able to cover it with a single leap, but now she was falling halfway. Ruewen's performance was extremely tenacious and persistent. Her shoulder touched the ground, and she did another roll, leaping forward. She was still heading in the direction of the balcony. There was a slight deviation, but it wasn't too far off. She couldn't be blamed for doing this. In fact, the entrance door behind her opened, and Jack, wrapped in dark red flames, rushed in again. With Ruewen having just endured the shock grenade and pulse grenade, it would be hard for her to contend against Jack in any way. She needed time and space to breathe and adjust. However, just as Ruewen's figure leaped onto the balcony and was about to get up, a thick and sturdy figure that was over 2 meters tall silently floated up from below the balcony. The exoskeleton armor assembled from metal modules was painted with a layer of dark light-absorbing paint. It looked a little blurry in the night. But a thick and dense aura emanated from this place. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. This body of steel silently extended outwards, but it also contained a scorching heat that caused the air to distort slightly. Luo Nan could even faintly see a blurry and complex structure appear within the warped ripples of air inside and outside the exoskeleton armor. The structure gradually became clear and discernible. Format structure. Deep Blue Walker. Luo Nan's mind went completely cold. Yan Yongbua. This fellow obviously wasn't Yan Yongbua, but that fellow had released a fatal smoke bomb. He had said that reinforcements would arrive in 5 minutes, but from the moment the communication had been severed to the moment the Deep Blue Walkers had appeared, not even 40 seconds had passed. Moreover, the Deep Blue Walker and Jack had formed a pincer attack. It was obvious that this was a pre-discussed tactic. Right now, Ruewen was being attacked from both front and back. Even though she was rapidly adjusting the rhythm of her breathing, it was an impossible task to recover before she collided with the Deep Blue Walkers. At this moment, the water body, formed by the fusion of body and soul, was toppling over. It was no longer a surging tide, but the entire foundation was shaking. How difficult would it be for Ruewen to regain the feeling of being one again under these circumstances? The Deep Blue Walker that had risen from the balcony reached out with his hand, wanting to capture the dizzy and unbalanced Ruewen. Luo Nan simply didn't have much time to think. The only thing he knew was that he had to do something. Right now, the only thing he could intervene with was the soul strength projected over. He could only rely on the towering format pyramid. Right now, the living room was illuminated by the format of fire on Jack's body. Dark red rays of light leaped about. And under this dark-colored background, a layer of rippling light suddenly rippled around Rui Wen's body. The rippling light acted as a canvas. 6 perfectly straight lines crisscrossed, instantly constructing a proper tetrahedron structure. The rippling light was turbulent, and the tetrahedron was turbulent as well. However, the two structures overlapped and their rhythms crisscrossed. They quickly formed a dynamic relationship of mutual cancellation and mutual response. Jack saw this mirage-like marvelous image from behind. His heart skipped a beat, and he increased his speed once more. At the same time, he warned the deep blue walker outside the balcony with a stern voice, "Deal the killing blow." Luo Nan's mind condensed at nearly the same time as Jack's shout. His consciousness concentrated, freeze. At this very moment, the concise and abstract tetrahedron structure was like a soul-suppressing pagoda towering in the void. All fluctuations were smoothed out in an instant. At the same time, it also froze Rui Wen's body in place. The rippling light froze her body and soul, which was hard to suppress for a moment. After extreme stillness came extreme movement. At the same time, the backlash that interfered with the mental plane and the material plane returned with a rumble. The tetrahedron structure outside Rui Wen's body warped and disappeared. The bit of soul strength Luo Nan had projected over was nearly completely scattered. The range of his senses became extremely fuzzy, but all of this was worth it. That instant of stillness was the best opportunity. Rui Wen grasped the critical juncture of the fusion of body and soul in an instant. She brought the rhythm of her body and mind under control once more. Jack's warning transmitted over. Although the deep blue walker didn't act according to Jack's words to seize the killing blow, the speed of his outstretched hands suddenly increased. He grabbed Rui Wen's neck. The problem was that the 5 fingers wrapped in armor had yet to tighten their grip. Rui Wen's aura returned to normal, converged, and exploded. The deep blue walker let out a muffled groan. His exoskeleton armor didn't have any scars, but his hands suddenly lost strength. The skeletal muscles beneath the armor were like they had been sucked dry of water. They shriveled and hardened, losing their bodily functions. What was even more fatal was that chaos appeared in the originally complete archetype format structure. The power of the format of fire was weakened. Amazing! Luo Nan's vision was blurry, but he could still sense Rui Wen. He hated that he couldn't clap his hands and cheer. Rui Wen's attack went from real to virtual, from virtual to real. She realized an exquisite and peerless switch between the material plane and the mental plane. Her ability, which was originally used on the material plane, struck out like the human-faced arachnid siege hammer. Her attack landed on the point of killing, heavily wounding the deep blue walker's fleshly body. This attack of the genius style exhausted all of the changes that Luo Nan could imagine. Luo Nan's ability and awareness to easily switch between the mental plane and the material plane hooked him to the point that he wished he could unleash a siege hammer to test it out. But Rui Wen maintained an inconceivably calm demeanor. It was as if the person who had just sunk into absolute passivity, who had just escaped from death, and who had just struck out with a brilliant and peerless attack was someone completely unrelated to her. Her movements were swift and decisive. She gently swayed her body and extricated herself from the deep blue walker's 5 stiff fingers. Then she stomped her feet heavily on the ground. Her bare feet made contact with the shattered glass on the ground. She exerted force. Even though the glass shards were embedded in her toes and soles, they were unable to pierce through her flesh. Instead, she borrowed the force to strike out with her fist. The powerful upward momentum, along with the terrifying deathly silent edge, collided with the deep blue walker's open armpit. Chapter 137. The strength of Rui Wen's fist was heavy and crafty. The exoskeleton armor that weighed 300 kilograms was blasted into the air by the force of her fist. The degree of impact wasn't particularly large, so the heavy fist force penetrated the armor and corroded the bones. Practically all of it was absorbed by the person inside the armor. The deep blue walker let out a miserable groan. Half of his body had lost all feeling, and he had completely lost his balance. The structure of his format was in a mess, and the format of fire had already dispersed. Even the control of his power was a problem. The only reason he was still conscious was because of his daily training. When he saw Rui Wen's long and narrow eyes glancing over, a chill overflowed from the bottom of his heart. He used the last bit of his strength to heavily stomp on the balcony and borrow the force to fly backwards. Midway, the flow diversion wings slightly spread open, and the jet propelled him upwards. He actually escaped from the battlefield. Rui Wen's fist repelled the deep blue walker. Her body fell slightly, and she once again exerted her strength to bounce over the balcony railing. Her momentum didn't falter, and she soared over 2 meters into the air. She then used her hands to support herself on the outer wall of the upper balcony and flipped over. Just a hair later, dark red flames sprayed out from the lower balcony. It was Jack's format of fire that had swept out, directly collapsing half of the balcony. The deep blue walker from Quantum Corporation was still worried that Rui Wen was a test subject that he wanted to bring back to the deep blue world, so he used tactical weapons. He hadn't gone for the kill during the fight, and had focused on control. But Jack was completely different. He didn't care one bit. He rushed to the edge of the balcony after his attack missed. He stuck his head out and looked up, but he didn't see anyone. The deep blue walker, who was using the flow diversion wings to soar into the air, had the perfect angle. He sent a warning through the already connected communication channel below. Jack's body shook. Whether it was the electronic eye that was integrated with many kinds of detection technology or other sensing instruments, none of them could detect Rui Wen's figure. But Rui Wen was indeed below. She was a living person, but she was like an incorporeal specter. After flipping over to the upper balcony, she immediately shifted to the side, borrowing the shadow of the balcony's side to noiselessly flip back over. She used the balcony railing as a cover, and a fist smashed onto the railing the instant Jack received the warning. The deathly silent edge penetrated, and it was that unpredictable transformation of illusion and reality. Jack groaned miserably and staggered backward. His leg was hit. He had only taken 2 steps back when his skin and flesh shriveled and fell off. His brittle bones couldn't bear the force of his weight and snapped, leaving half of his leg bone behind. Jack fell backwards, heavily smashing onto the floor. His appearance was just like the great maw basilisk that had once been insufferably arrogant in the fighting arena. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Rui Wen. Jack's face contorted as he roared. But at the same time, he used both his hands and feet to fiercely exert his strength, gliding swiftly across the messy floor of the room. The deep CEM field and the format of fire fused together to form a substantial vortex of fire. It continuously contracted and expanded, forming a powerful repelling force that blocked Rui Wen's advance that followed him like a shadow. His speed was quite fast. In the blink of an eye, he had slid out of the door. This time, he did not close the door, because there was a steel wall moving horizontally, blocking him from the outside. Another deep blue walker. This exoskeleton armor looked even thicker than the one that escaped from the balcony. It stood there and blocked the door of the room tightly. Then he turned his arm to actually raise an external bulletproof shield. He smashed it onto the floor with a bang, firmly securing it in place. If it was just a shield, then it would be useless against Rui Wen's unfathomable ability. The problem lay in the fact that flames were surging on this person's steel body. There were even layers of flames that gathered on top of the shield. It was clear that this was a special technique. Every skill had its specialization, and its defensive power was certainly far above the norm. Luo Nan suddenly thought of something as he observed the situation. According to the introductions of a few popular science programs, Deep Blue Walkers usually operated in units of 5 to 7 people when they fought against mutants. Back when they surrounded and killed the burning wraith on the warship, there were 5 people working together. They clearly belonged to the military and Quantum Corporation, but they advanced and retreated in an extremely orderly manner. They certainly put in painstaking effort in the corresponding joint attack training. In other words, there were at least 3 other Deep Blue Walkers in the vicinity of this apartment building other than the sturdy shield-wielding man in front of him and the one who had been heavily injured by Rui Wen. Just as this thought came through his mind, the sound of heavy footsteps rang out from the messy balcony. Another Deep Blue Walker was undoubtedly there. Looking at how he wielded the gun with both hands and how he operated it skillfully, it was clear that he was not the unlucky bastard who had half his body crippled. At the same time, a sound came from the bedroom. The exit was really blocked. This apartment was a small apartment commonly seen in Xia City. It had a structure of 2 bedrooms and 1 living room. The only things that could lead to the outside world were the main door, the balcony, and the master bedroom. Right now, 3 Deep Blue Walkers were blocking the 3 exits. It was like catching a turtle in a jar. This wasn't a battlefield suitable for Deep Blue Walkers. But if they were able to utilize it properly, Rui Wen would find it hard to resist even if they used tactical ammunition like stun grenades and pulse grenades. The situation took a sudden turn for the worse. Please continue to the next page if this chapter isn't finished. Rui Wen was silent. She had no intention of changing her target. She faced the sturdy shield-wielding man outside the door and sprinted in a straight line. Her speed grew faster and faster. Everyone, including Luo Nan, thought that Rui Wen was going to use the same old trick again. She was going to use her unpredictable deathly silent edge to directly penetrate the sturdy shield-wielding man's defense. Electric waves crisscrossed in the air. Several Deep Blue Walkers instantly communicated through telepathy. It's impossible for Wall 5's 100-fold flame to be penetrated in one strike. Follow up with a wave of stun grenades. Cannon 6, Roger. Prepare tactical ammunition. Prepare to fire. Gun 4, Roger. Prepare to charge. Roger. A tactical grenade was tossed out from the bedroom after an instant of synchronizing. Rui Wen was charging too fast. The grenade's delay wasn't that coincidental. It was impossible for it to explode before Rui Wen and Wall 5 collided. However, as long as Rui Wen was unable to instantly charge through Wall 5's impenetrable defense, even if it was just a delay of half a second, the grenade would explode in the back of her head. Luo Nan saw the stun grenade fly through the air. He was already prepared to activate the format pyramid once more, taking the first step to help Rui Wen resist the incoming attack. But right at this moment, he discovered that the rhythm of Rui Wen's aura was rapidly rising. It was like the dense beat of a drum, connecting together into one. And in the instant when she was about to escape his control, she fiercely gathered her strength. The change of extreme movement and extreme stillness caused the originally rhythmic undulations of the body and soul body's body of water. Rui Wen opened her mouth slightly. Her aura interlinked with the inside and the outside, and the shock waves of this undulations exploded outwards. It was as if Luo Nan could hear the roar of a malevolent giant beast at this moment. However, this explosive attack didn't form a substantial sound wave. Instead, it directly struck the mental plane. It was yet another marvelous switch between the material and mental planes. The shield man was defending against Rui Wen's deathly silent sharpness with all his strength. His attention was completely focused on the shield, but Rui Wen did the exact opposite. She unleashed a mental storm that was similar to the effects of a siege hammer. That was all there was to criticizing Gao Yang for his lack of funds. Wall 5. The shield man's vital signs rapidly changed, causing the team commander to discover that things were far from good. He issued a warning. Wall 5 wanted to hold on, but after the mental storm, true power invaded him. It was like a silent, flowing underground river. It was empty and cold, but it was aimed directly at his weak inner organs. It pierced through in one strike. The 100-fold flame was suddenly extinguished. Wall 5 fell backwards, face down, and the shield covered his body. Chapter 138. The stun grenade exploded behind her, and Ruewen fell forward, pouncing onto Wall 5's body. Her body and soul, along with the fiercely vibrating air, shook with a rumble. However, Ruewen had deliberately maintained her body and soul in a state of turbulence. She firmly grasped the rhythm, like a seasoned boatman steering a boat like it was flying amidst the howling winds and huge waves. She was already well practiced even when faced with larger storms and waves. Her state came up, and under the continuous shear, she actually neutralized most of the impact. This sort of outstanding combat intuition was truly fearsome and terrifying. Ruewen somersaulted on top of the shield and jumped up. She walked 2 steps and her feet staggered a bit. But Luonan's format pyramid appeared and disappeared outside of her body. Soon, this bit of aftermath was pacified. Ruewen turned her head to look all around, searching for traces of Jack. Right now there was not a soul in sight in the hallway of the apartment building. The window of the stairwell, which was connected to half the wall, had been shattered. The deep blue walkers were large in size, so it was inconvenient for them to take the elevator or the stairs. Therefore, they had directly descended from the sky, breaking the window and smashing through the wall to get in. Jack should have escaped from there. The sound of heavy footsteps rushed out from within the room. The gun-wielding deep blue walker, Gun 4, rushed out the door. His majestic body performed a tactical maneuver in midair. He half knelt on the ground, blocking in front of the muscular shield-bearer who still couldn't get up. The muzzle of his gun locked onto Ruewen, but he didn't pull the trigger. Clearly, even a deep blue walker would feel fear in his heart after having 2 comrades fall in succession. He had to consider the problem of losing members if he continued to fight. Ruewen didn't pay attention to him. She didn't say a single word from start to finish. She just shot a cold glance at the pitch-black muzzle of the gun and directly jumped down from the broken window and the wall. This time she really jumped down. Gun 4 didn't attack. Cannon 6 walked to the door from inside and looked at the remains of the stun grenade that had exploded. His mouth mumbled something that was unknown. The 3 deep blue walkers, 1 standing, 1 kneeling, and 1 lying down, tightly blocked the narrow stairwell and the entrance area. This sort of tactless behavior made their team leader, Brain 1, very angry. Are you guys looking forward to the team being wiped out? In any case, there's about 1/3 of it. Cough, the helmet. The one who responded was Wall 5. After saying this, his aura continued to weaken. Gun 4 hurriedly turned around and helped him take off his helmet so that he wouldn't choke to death from the blood he spat out. Gun 4 and Cannon 6 saw Wall 5's appearance. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. They looked at each other and asked, "How is Fish 2? His left arm is broken, and he has lost part of his heart function. Prepare to be sent to the hospital. Wall 5 is just nice to get into a car." "Ha, that's good." The problem was, other than the careless Wall 5, no one could laugh at Brain 1's clumsy joke. Only a little more than a minute had passed since the start of the attack until now. Ruewen had gone back and forth between the porch and the balcony. She had taken down 2 deep blue walkers and cut off the calf of the burner, Jack. Finally, she had calmly retreated. Even if they were somewhat restrained in order to achieve their goal of capturing him alive, what was with this feeling that they would collapse at the slightest touch? Artillery 6 casually tossed away the remains of the stun grenade and gave up on searching for the reason why Ruewen was almost unaffected. He asked, "Do we still want to enter the second location?" Brain 1 did not reply immediately. Gun 4 finally could not help but ask, "Are you sure we are not facing a mutant?" Looking at the data, the target slaughtered a great maw basilisk like slaughtering a chicken half an hour ago. You should be asking why a transport mission suddenly turned into a siege. Brain 1 was a bit angry out of humiliation. He had not issued the order to end the battle quickly, but the subsequent tactical arrangements had all come from his mouth. Today, he had welcomed a complete and utter failure. He could not help but be angry. This is also my doubt, but we have no way to investigate who is responsible for the time being. A sudden radio wave cut into the internal communications channel of a group of deep blue walkers. Yan Yongbo's figure occupied a small portion of the tactical panel. "Captain. All of the deep blue walkers on the books of Quantum Corporation belong to the Sky Blue Security Company." Yan Yongbo was the assistant manager of the Sky Blue Security Company. He was also the chief captain of the 4 deep blue walker squads in the Xia City area. He was their immediate superior. Yan Yongbo was still sitting in his office at this time. His 10 fingers were crossed, covering half of his face. It was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry. "I have already notified the government, the military, the Ability User Society. A human-faced arachnid has appeared in Kalen Avenue Park 23. A squad of deep blue walkers from my company discovered that a human-faced arachnid was harming the citizens while they were being transported. They took action to stop it. Since the human-faced arachnid is already half complete, it has stimulated the potential of an unknown person and caused his ability to awaken. According to the relevant provisions of the memorandum, we will temporarily use lethal weapons and apply for a report. Emergency authorization. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page." As the squad commander, Brain 1 instantly understood Yan Yongbo's thoughts. He was quite surprised. The Deep Blue Walkers of Quantum Corporation were not allowed to be equipped with lethal weapons before the government and the military authorized them. Some powerful equipment exclusive to the Deep Blue Walkers could only stay in the warehouse and on the transport vehicles. Their squad was originally tasked with a transport mission. They needed to pass through the wilderness, so they were equipped with a considerable amount of lethal weapons. They were all installed on the transport vehicles. They originally thought that they would be equipped and used after arriving in the wilderness to ensure their safety. But according to Yan Yongbo's intentions, they would use them now. Yan Yongbo was now under enormous pressure. One mishap and the emergency authorization wasn't approved. Under the pressure of the government and the military, his position in the company would probably be pushed to the bottom. Of course, Yan Yongbo knew the consequences, but if Ruewen were to escape from under his eyes, the consequences wouldn't be much different from his own. He continued to speak. "Your mission is very important. You need to do your utmost to protect the innocent citizens while eliminating the human-faced arachnid. What about the controlled personnel? Do your utmost to protect them, but you still need to prioritize your own safety. Use the terrain appropriately and choose long-range weapons." Understood. Brain 1 understood tacitly. He ended his conversation with Yan Yongbo and turned to issue orders to his subordinates. "Carry out the orders. There just so happens to be a charged particle cannon in the car. I think this apartment building is pretty good. Set it up there and aim it at Park 23. Speed. Or are you saying that you want to send Snake 7, who is already in position, into the enemy's mouth?" Luo Nan's line of sight followed Ruewen the entire time. He followed her as she leapt down. Right now, the severely restricted range of his senses allowed him to sweep a rough outline of the external characteristics of the apartment building. And his luck wasn't bad. He was able to see the relevant signs with a fleeting glance. This information was immediately transmitted back to the location of his soul body. But when his mind was distracted, Luo Nan suddenly discovered that the distance between his soul body and the location of the incident was already extremely close. Before this thought could end, the dusky and chaotic region of the surroundings returned to light in an instant. Luo Nan shifted his line of sight and a map of the entire region with a diameter of 1 kilometer opened up in an instant. The explosively expanded range, the complex environment, and the enormous amount of information were like a hurricane rising from the flat ground, surrounding him. Luo Nan had an unprecedented feeling of being able to see through everything at this time. The night wind blew, causing a slight chill to pass through his body. Chapter 139. If it was nothingness, then there was no such thing as transparency. Luo Nan gazed at the night sky. The cool autumn night wind passed through his current location. The airflow was like an incorporeal river, rippling with fine waves that were hard to see with the naked eye. Luo Nan had never been able to clearly feel his own progress like he did now. His soul body had intervened into the material plane and left behind traces that belonged to him in the void. He instinctively raised his hands and raised his eyes to size them up. Luo Nan rarely paid attention to the soul body itself. From his understanding, the soul was like a specter. It was transparent and fuzzy, like a simple projection. But right now, he raised his hands. This was the habitual action of a normal person. He also saw 2 slender arms. They were even wrapped in his outer clothes today. They appeared translucent at first glance, but they radiated a faint halo of light from the inside to the outside. They gave off an unconventional feeling. It wasn't just his arms. Every position of his soul body was like this. This layer of halo was the product of mutual interference between the mental and material planes. It gave Luo Nan a practical and sensible reference. If he deliberately interfered with the material plane, the intensity of the halo would increase. It would manifest his work in the form of light outside. And if he deliberately distanced himself from the material plane, the halo would quickly disappear, causing his soul to return to a level that was hard to see with the naked eye. Of course, this was only the most basic of methods. A large amount of energy would be lost. There was no efficiency to speak of. A truly efficient method. One would know just by looking at Ruiwen. Right now, Ruiwen was running on the outer wall of the apartment building. This was the right word. It was extremely appropriate. The scale of this apartment building wasn't small. It was over 100 stories tall and had a total height of over 300 meters. Ruiwen walked on the outer wall of the building. She was a bit sluggish at first, using both her hands and feet. But she soon found a way to grasp her balance. She only relied on her 2 legs. She occasionally jumped in coordination. It didn't matter if there were any protruding balconies or railings to borrow strength for support. It was as if she was walking on flat ground. Luo Nan felt that she was no worse than the veteran ability users of the society. At the very least, Cat Eyes didn't seem to be as fast and sharp as Ruiwen's during the operation on Friday night. And below Ruiwen, about 20 floors away, was Jack's rapidly descending figure. Of course, Jack was aware of Ruiwen's pursuit. Although he had lost a leg at the moment, he was using both his hands and feet. Relying on his superhuman body condition, as well as his utilization of the deep sea EM field, he was like a rapidly slithering gecko. His speed was not considered slow. The problem was, Ruiwen was even faster than him. In the span of another breath, the distance between the 2 sides had been pulled to less than 10 floors, 30 meters. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Within. Jack turned his head and looked down. There were still 40 floors to go. He suddenly let out a howl and leaped down. It looked like a suicidal move, but it was actually aimed in the right direction. It smashed through 2 decorative glass platforms in the middle of the way, and then paused for a moment on the supporting steel structure before crashing into the ground. In the middle of the night, there were few pedestrians and vehicles near the residential area. However, amidst the roar of the engine, there was a convertible military off-road vehicle speeding over, quickly approaching. Jack jumped up and crashed into the car. Who would believe that such a coincidence wasn't planned in advance? Luo Nan saw that Jack's jump just now had smashed the buffering platform, cutting off the possibility of Rui when following the pattern. And once the off-road vehicle drove onto the high-speed magnetic rails, it would be hard for Rui Wen to catch up, even if she had peerless bravery. Luo Nan's thoughts spun and he locked onto the driver of the off-road vehicle through the air. He borrowed a bit of strength from the cultivating human-faced arachnid to launch a siege hammer attack. The driver simply fell limply to the ground in one strike. The vehicle quickly switched to autopilot, but the rapid maneuvers of the battle required the participation of the driver. The off-road vehicle went a bit out of control right now. It swung back automatically and Rui Wen jumped down from above the apartment building. 40 floors. It might even be a bit higher. Luo Nan was directly stupefied in place. Right now it was as if Rui Wen had made an ordinary and light jump. She jumped from the building's facade into the night sky of Xia City. The dusky night merged with the neon lights of the metropolis to become a wantonly painted backdrop. Rui Wen's thin figure was the most eye-catching silhouette on the surface. All the way until the power of the jump was exhausted and gravity was about to take the dominant position at the critical juncture, there was a boom and a wave of air exploded from her body. It was as if she had shaken off some restraints. Her entire body was like a glider, sweeping across the low altitude. Her swiftness and liveliness were a perfect combination. Gravity had no choice but to take a back seat. Rui Wen couldn't completely overcome gravity, but she could control her direction. She smoothly found a place to borrow strength. She grabbed the long pole of the street lamp with a single hand and spun around the pole at a high speed that even top gymnasts would find it hard to achieve. She soared into the air once more, completely eliminating the damage that gravity could bring. She completely entered the domain of control. Rui Wen landed gracefully on the ground in the next moment. Her position was approximately 30 meters to the left of the off-road vehicle. Luo Nan witnessed the entire process of Rui Wen leaping into the air. He could only sigh right now. During this process, Rui Wen's body and soul, which were blended as one, reached the limit of changes once more. Her entire body seemed to be switching back and forth between the material plane and the mental plane. Please turn the page if this chapter doesn't end. There were a few moments when it seemed as if it would transform into nothingness. Only Luo Nan, who had a close connection with her, was able to lock onto those inconceivable moments. It was because of this that Luo Nan began to understand Rui Wen's consistent combat logic. She was a person who wandered the edge of the world. Her body and soul, which were blended as one, and her inconceivable supernatural ability gave her the innate instinct to switch back and forth between the mental and material planes. It made her every move hard to grasp and impossible to defend against. Jack didn't have Luo Nan's feeling of sorrow. "Fuck you." The unconscious driver was pushed out of the off-road vehicle. Jack gritted his teeth and switched back to manual mode. The speed of the vehicle didn't decrease, but increased instead. It charged towards Rui Wen. Rui Wen dodged out of the way, but Jack let out another muffled grunt from within the vehicle. The off-road vehicle was unable to block her at all. Flames burst out from his shoulder. He had taken another blow from Rui Wen, and the format of fire nearly went out of control. Perhaps it was because of this that the off-road vehicle Jack was driving didn't slow down at all. It swayed and cut into a nearby green park, crashing into the outer flower bed. A boom rang out, and Jack was directly knocked out of the front window under the effect of the powerful inertia. This saved him the time to get out of the car. He did another roll and dodged into the forest. Rui Wen still didn't utter a word. She was like a phantom, sweeping past the treetops and continuing her pursuit. Jack practically didn't have a chance to catch his breath. He had lost the courage to fight Ruiwen head-on. He used both his hands and feet to make his way through the green shrubs. He used this sort of embarrassing and humiliating method to grit his teeth and wait for the contact signal that should have arrived long ago. This was the second battlefield that Yan Yongbu's underlings had confirmed to him. It was a wide area that could truly display the abilities of the Deep Blue Walkers. Once Ruiwen was lured here, the 5 to 7 Deep Blue Walkers would launch a joint attack. They could use absolute strength to suppress and capture Ruiwen. But who could tell him where the Deep Blue Walkers were right now? The green shrubs came to an end. There was a small man-made lake in front of him. The pitch-black surface of the water blocked his way. Jack was already unable to stop his body, and he didn't dare to stop. He charged head first into the lake. The instant he entered the water, Ruiwen silently swept over the surface of the lake, and a deathly silent sharp edge swept past. The surface of the lake swayed with minute ripples. A muffled scream came from the surface of the lake, and a dark red flame suddenly lit up. Ruiwen locked onto the chaotic and rapidly weakening aura at the bottom of the lake. She slightly adjusted her posture and was just about to enter the water to make a final conclusion. A tiny speck of light shone on the surface of the lake beside her. A terrifying impact descended in the next moment. Chapter 140. The charged particles fiercely collided with the air molecules. The atmosphere above the lake was suddenly dyed with a layer of strange dark green. The fiercely warped air was like layers of pulsing willow, the wisps that covered nearly 2 acres of the lake's surface. Regardless of how the molecules reacted, the kinetic strike arrived first. The particle beam had already rapidly diffused through the nearly 2 kilometers of linear distance. Its penetrative power had dropped substantially, but the range of its diffusion was even greater. It didn't give anyone the chance to dodge at all. Ruiwen's body was instantly smashed into the lake by the terrifying impact. She violently swelled and surged with the lake water before sinking straight to the bottom. Next, the beam formed by the particle beam covered the lake's surface. It was nothing more than a small addition to the building blocks. Target confirmed. Artillery 6 calmly reported from the top of the apartment building, satellite locked on. The SCA's remote authority is attempting to connect. Requesting assistance in shielding. Understood. Stand by for 30 seconds. Retreat after confirming the damage to the target. Brain 1 gave a simple response. Then he called out to another squad member, Snake 7. Snake 7. Okay. Got it. We have to wait for the radiation to drop a bit. Damn it. Why does this kind of dangerous work always fall on my head? A lazy voice that was completely different from the rest of the squad rang out. It successfully made Brain 1's face turn ashen. He even felt a faint pain in his brain. Even with Yan Yongbu's endorsement, using a weapon on the level of a charged particle cannon in the metropolitan area of Xia City was still a great deal of pressure. Under the pervasive surveillance system of society, the powerful energy and corresponding radiation of the particle cannon when it was fired was practically the same as firing a firecracker right under the noses of the government and the military. Half of the high officials of Xia City would jump out of their beds because of this. Every second the particle cannon was on the top of the building strengthened the evidence that would send them to court and jail them. Even with Quantum Corporation backing him, he wasn't willing to take this risk. It just so happened that the one carrying out this mission was Snake 7. Brain 1 growled, if we don't intervene, the radiation in this area won't drop even after 100 years. Hurry up. Snake 7 cursed in a low voice, but his actions weren't as careful and cautious as his words suggested. Half a second later, a slender deep blue walker appeared from its hiding place on the outside of the lake's surface. This chapter is not finished. Please continue. He flew up from the ground and, propelled by the jet, passed through the air that was still unusually hot, and patrolled the surface of the lake in circles. F***CK, this kind of old-fashioned armor has no effect on gamma rays at all. The built-in measuring meter is off the charts. You have 15 seconds, then I'll have Cannon 6 fire another shot. Fuck. Snake 7 immediately calmed down because he knew that his team leader would really do this. Under pressure, efficiency increased. Snake 7 sent a report back 5 seconds later. I've discovered the target's reaction. Wait, a false alarm. Snake 7. There are 2 people in the lake, okay? We have to eliminate the interference first, right? Snake 7 had already flown into the lake as he spoke. He picked up the main culprit that caused his false alarm and tossed him onto the shore of the lake. Jack. Is he still alive? The one who spoke was not Brain 1, but Yen Yongbua. As a commander of a higher rank, he had repeatedly spoken above his rank. Clearly, the pressure he was under was no less than Brain 1's. Snake 7 turned Jack's face over. Ugh, this person's head is like an air-dried figure. I need his brain nucleus and the deep-sea Type 4 dynamo core. Forget it. Bring his corpse back. As you wish, sir. Oh right, team leader. Can you give me another 15 seconds? 10 seconds. Brain 1 was clearly gritting his teeth when he spoke. Snake 7 gestured an okay sign towards the distant building, then immediately dove into the water again. Yen Yongbua also felt that his current actions were suspicious of exceeding his authority. He took the initiative to find Brain 1 in private for the sake of alleviating this awkwardness. Is this Snake 7 that radiation kid? The ability user that awakened on his own initiative, but still wants to be a burner. Brain 1 also needed to relieve his taut nerves. He responded after hearing Yen Yongbua's question, yes. He has the astonishing ability to neutralize radiation. When paired with the format of fire, he is indeed like a tiger that has grown wings. It's just that his personality is very hard to get right. Should I transfer to another post? No. I shouldn't go and harm others. Brain 1 laughed bitterly. Snake 7 discovered the true target underwater as they spoke. Actually, he didn't need to spend much effort. He just needed to find the only light source in the dark depths of the water. I've discovered the target. Oh, what kind of skill effect is this? Rui Wen's body floated up and down in the muddy and unclear depths of the water that had yet to subside. Please flip the page if this chapter is not finished. Her soft droplet swayed gently, and she had already entered an unconscious state. However, there was a halo of light wrapping around her body. There was a neat and strict diagram structure inside. Snake 7 had already vomited when he saw it during his various training sessions. Archetype format. Superior authority access, sharing the observation angle. Brain 1 reminded Snake 7, don't be careless. A similar situation occurred when the target woke up from unconsciousness last time. There was also the recovery from the stun grenade, understood. Snake 7 displayed his straightforward style of doing things. He directly pulled out his gun and shot Rui Wen's body underwater. She didn't react at all, but the light of the diagram structure gradually extinguished. Brain 1 was also guessing when he saw this scene, maybe this is a certain ability of the target's. Maybe it's the ability to recover blood under the influence of the subconscious. Maybe. Yen Yongbua didn't say much. Brain 1 didn't have the qualifications to participate when it came to information about the Apocalypse Laboratory. If the high-efficacy anesthetic doesn't work, then I can only chop off her hands and legs. Though he said this, Snake 7 still took out a set of electromagnetic shackles that he had prepared earlier and placed them on Rui Wen's wrists. Under the effect of the strong magnetic force, Rui Wen's 2 hands were firmly joined together. She looked as if she didn't have any strength to resist. Done. Brain 1 let out a long sigh. Cannon 6, dismantle the mount. Retreat. Cannon 6 rapidly dismantled the temporarily constructed mount. At this time, Gun 4, who was in another direction, came over to help. The two people carried the heavy equipment and directly flew down the apartment building. At this time, the equipment transport vehicle was already waiting there. There was also a personnel transport vehicle that drove into park number 23 and went to the lakeside to provide support. The logistics personnel got off the vehicle and moved Jack's corpse to the back of the car. Frankly speaking, this kind of behavior was a bit discriminatory against the wounded. This was because the injured Fish 2 and Wall 5 were in the back of the car right now. They were prepared to be transported to the medical department. It was truly unlucky to carry a corpse in. But thinking about how Ruiwen had been directly hit by the particle cannon, she should also be in a seriously injured state. It would be better to send her to the hospital as well. Snake 7 still hadn't come ashore at this time. The logistics personnel first stuffed Jack's corpse inside. It was good that the car was spacious, so they didn't have to worry about the lack of space. But when they put Jack down, they suddenly heard a cracked sound. Several people followed the sound and searched, but they saw that Jack's shriveled head had split open. A faint red light seeped out from the cracks of the bone where the scalp had fallen off. Chapter 141. His skull is transparent. His insides are about to be empty. Fish 2 was still wearing the exoskeleton armor inside the carriage, but he had taken off his helmet to reveal the pale face of a middle-aged man. He had already left his combat state, but he still needed to wear the exoskeleton armor because his left arm had already been severed. The muscles of the left half of his body had withered substantially, and his ribs were broken. It was the Deep Blue Walker's unique support structure that maintained the various fractures without dislocation or deformation. This tragic injury was caused by none other than Ruiwen. Therefore, when he saw the condition of Jack's corpse, he associated it with his family's misfortune and felt somewhat rueful. Across from him, the short and sturdy Wall 5 had taken off his armor and was holding an oxygen inhaler. He leaned against the wall and pretended to be dead. When Yan's eyes were half open as he spoke vaguely. There was still blood foaming in his mouth. My 5 viscera and 6 bowels are about to be empty. What's inside? I don't know. Let's go back and dissect him for the hospital. Fish 2 said with a bitter smile. We're also targets for dissection. Wall 5 gritted his teeth when he thought of this. Fuck, what kind of evil ability does the target have? It's sinister to this extent. Is her stomach full of venom? Fish 2 lightly pressed down on his chest. Of course he couldn't feel anything through the thick armor. I heard the target used to be the poster child of the underground fighting arena. She participated in underage fighting and only just awakened half an hour ago. From the classification of ability users, she should be a gifted one. But the feeling of fighting is completely wrong. Wall 5 coughed. If she's a gifted one, then I'll dig out my heart. You'll dig it out even if you don't want to when you get back. The ratio of humans can easily break 50. Us two brothers have to rely on the path of altered humans. Wall 5 used the back of his head to hit the steel plate of the carriage. Altered humans, altered humans. My 10 years of blood and sweat are all gone with this altered humans. That's not necessarily true. Fish 2 lowered his head to look at Jack's sinister appearance of death. This guy is also an altered human, but he's also a burner. As he spoke, he extended his hand to lightly touch Jack's skull. The dark red glow came precisely from the cracks of the bones here. But he didn't expect that Jack's bones had already become brittle to a certain degree. His scalp was loose and cracked. A finger wrapped in armor lightly touched Jack, and a piece of bone actually fell off and sank into the skull with a clicking sound. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. With the appearance of such a hole, the red light inside was even more eye-catching. Fish 2 and Wall 5 had good eyesight, and with just a glance, they roughly understood. Wall 5 was shocked. This brain tissue. Will it be the same for my body in the future? Fish 2 snorted. He wasn't in a hurry to verify it. He first connected to the team's comms. Jack's cranial cavity discovered abnormalities. Open it. Yan Yongbo once again overstepped his boundaries and spoke first in Brain 1's mind. He then added, turn on vision sharing. Understood. Punch 2 activated the camera on his shoulder and exerted force in his hand at the same time. Jack's malevolent skull was crushed like a sun-dried eggshell. It could be seen that the brain tissue inside had withered and shrunk to the size of an egg. The original grayish-white color was now somewhat black, as if it had been roasted by flames and was severely deformed. But what was even more eye-catching was that there was a grain that looked like a wheat seed embedded in the center, and it was even emitting a faint light. Fish 2 used the equipment to scan and report the relevant information. Brain tissue activity loss, central granule material is metalloid, surface temperature is 90 degrees Celsius, let me have a look. Understood. Fish 2 extended his right hand. Even though he was wrapped in a thick metal glove, his fingers were still nimble and delicate. He practically didn't have any contact with the deformed brain tissue and picked up the metal wheat seed. All sorts of detection equipment continued to display their effects. Very soon, the detailed structure of the metal wheat seed was magnified and displayed in a high-precision scanning method. At this time, Yin Yongboi and the others finally confirmed that this wheat seed was actually formed from a metal thread that was as thin as a strand of hair that was tightly coiled and woven together. Between the intertwining threads, there wasn't a gap to be seen at all. Dynamo core. That's the dynamo core. Deep Sea Type 4. I didn't think it could be arranged in this style. At this time, the rear door of the car opened and Snake 7 said something in passing. He carried the unconscious Rui Wen onto the car and the car immediately started. Go in, go in. Snake 7 drove the 2 wounded people inside and kicked Jack's corpse away in passing. Only then did he put Rui Wen down and take off his helmet, revealing a thin, long, and slightly sunken young face that was sunny and loved to laugh. He let out a long sigh. It's finally done. How come I only came back a bit late and you guys already broke someone's brain? This chapter isn't finished. Please turn the page. The shell burst. Do you still need someone else to do it for you in other places? Fish 2 was older than the young man by over 10 years. He normally took care of this little brother of his. He didn't want this kid to be too impudent in front of his superior and attract a bad impression. So he gave him a meaningful glance and brought him into a serious topic. The radiation level over there is too high. It's no problem to clean up the aftermath, right? No problem. We carried out active intervention. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come back so late. Speaking of which, Sir Yen, does the dynamo core style have any special uses? Before Yan Yongbo could respond, Brain 1 transmitted over. Car number 2, what did you guys do? The route is wrong. The route was predetermined by you. Snake 7 stuck his head out to look at the driver's seat in front of him, but his face had only moved halfway when his pupils suddenly dilated. A stern shout exploded from his throat, eyes. Careful. His body ignited with a rumble as his voice rang out. His body fiercely pounced forward, but even so, his forehead still went slightly numb. Snake 7 didn't care about anything else. He borrowed the force of his forward charge and extended his hand to grab his 2 heavily injured companions. Fish 2 and Wall 5 were both experienced burners. They detected that something was wrong practically as soon as Snake 7's face changed color. It was just as Snake 7 had done. Their first reaction was to ignite the format of fire. But the problem was that it was impossible for their body's current state to achieve peak reactions. They might not even be able to form a passable format of fire. The 2 were more than a hair slower. When Snake 7 rushed forward, his eyes, which had received the support of the format of fire, saw in despair that there were several fine threads in the air that were hard to see with the naked eye. They split off from the metal wheat seed between Fish 2's fingers and pierced into Fish 2 and Wall 5's eyeballs one after the other. Then there was a terrifying tremor. Irreversible destruction took shape in an instant. Wall 5's eyeballs exploded and he fell askew with a muffled groan. Fish 2 screamed. The metal wheat seed clearly treated Fish 2 as its main target. Countless fine threads that were hard to see with the naked eye pierced into Fish 2's exoskeleton armor. Snake 7's right hand grabbed onto Wall 5's calf at this time. His left hand had already made contact with Fish 2's upper arm. However, Fish 2's feet rose soundlessly as he screamed. He heavily stamped onto Snake 7's abdomen and his strength exploded. He kicked this young man, along with Wall 5, out of the car. Chapter 142. Snake 7 originally wanted to find the sealed door of the carriage to borrow strength and react. However, the steel door controlled by the electronic lock opened noiselessly. It didn't give him any chance at all. There was nothing behind him, and the power that penetrated his abdomen pressed him down until he hit the ground. The exoskeleton armor collided with the ground, producing sparks. Snake 7 could only protect Wall 5 with all his strength as the high-speed transport vehicle rapidly pulled apart the distance. Snake 7 stared at the taillights of the distant transport vehicle. His eyes were blood red as he lifted his left forearm. In the next moment, a miniature EMP electromagnetic grenade shot out. It drew a precise parabola in the air and fell in front of the transport vehicle. There was a muffled explosion, and the gamma-ray flow penetrated the weakest part of the transport vehicle's armor under Snake 7's precise control. It burned down practically all of the electronic equipment in an instant. The car suddenly lost control and was about to flip over. Fortunately, the 5-ton body of the car resisted the inertia and slid for dozens of meters before stopping. And in the process of sliding, Fish 2's figure had already flown out of the carriage. With the ingenious control of the jet, he finally stood on the roof of the carriage that had stopped. Snake 7 wasn't the least bit happy when he saw that familiar figure. On the contrary, a deep chill seeped from the bottom of his heart. At this moment, Fish 2's face had already completely turned into the color of a deathly gray. There was no sign of life at all. Instead, the metal wheat seed, in front of him, supported by countless thin threads, ignited with a blood-colored flame. It continuously approached Fish 2's face until it was stuffed into his empty eye sockets, reflecting a demonic and distorted red light. "I'll fuck your 8 generations of ancestors." Snake 7 cursed loudly from a distance of several dozen meters. The young man wanted to rush forward, but Wall 5's breathing was getting weaker and weaker. His eyes were bleeding profusely, and he had just raised his strength in an instant, and now he was being severely disrupted. His already weak internal organs were shaken, and he could not stop coughing blood. Snake 7 gave Wall 5 the life-prolonging medicine that his own armor had concocted. He roared into the communications channel, "Brain 1, where are you? Where are you?" Brain 1 responded in a bone-chilling voice, "Sword 3 will be in position in 7 seconds. Car 1 will arrive in 15 seconds. Snake 7 is on standby." "To hell with standby, cough." A cough suddenly sounded in the communication channel, causing the entire channel to fall silent. That belonged to the fist. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. The tube band had already changed its sound. What an unexpected surprise. There's actually proton. Quantum Corporation's new Walker is already using proton as a backup energy source. The purity is close to 40%. That's good, very good. F***CK your mother. Snake 7 opened his mouth and spat back. Brain 1 was just about to add a temporary encrypted network to get out of the way when the voice called out, "Mr. Yen, I know you're here." After a second of silence, Yen Yongbu's suppressed voice cut in, "Jack, what the F***ck are you trying to do? I'll demonstrate to you the mysteries of the dynamo core configuration." As he spoke, dark red flames sprayed out from Fish 2's eye sockets, nostrils, and mouth. They quickly connected and spread throughout his entire body. "I'm also very sorry that this happened. I should have used a more peaceful method, but there's no other way. I'm just too hungry. Do you remember? You used my previous body as bait for that brilliant particle cannon. It wasn't a big deal, but it cut off my energy supply. I had to look for it somewhere else. Otherwise, the new life that I obtained with great difficulty will die prematurely. I don't want that, and you probably don't want that either. Otherwise, who's going to reveal the dynamo core to you?" "Oh, fuck off." A dark and heavy blade light suddenly cut in. It was Sword 3, who was the most proficient in assassination and concealment in the squad. He borrowed the shadows of the dark night to leap onto the roof of the transport vehicle and attack from the rear. The specially configured exoskeleton armor was practically silent. It only activated at full power when the blade light shone on the body. The auxiliary ejector burst forth with a jet stream, causing the speed of the blade to break through the sound barrier in an instant. It was already within reach of Fish 2's neck. "Idiot!" The nozzle of the auxiliary ejector fell down in an instant. The buffering equipment within the armor also strangely loosened. The power of distortion acted on the arm within the armor. Sword 3's arm bones broke into 17 or 18 pieces in an instant. The thunderous strike had deviated to some unknown place. Then there was a kick to his lower abdomen. He was sent flying back from where he came from. And right in front of him, Snake 7 had already taken advantage of the gap in Sword 3's surprise attack to launch an all-out assault. He charged a distance of several dozen meters in the span of a single breath. The format of fire burned at full power, but a secret door opened on the chest armor and light condensed. This chapter has yet to end. Please turn the page. There's also a particle cannon, miniature. Fish 2's blazing eye sockets swiveled over. His ashen face that had already lost the vitality of his muscles revealed a twisted and terrifying smile. This smile belonged to Jack. Don't make a fool of yourself with such a retarded structure. It was at this moment that Snake 7 shockingly discovered that the exoskeleton armor that had fused with him had suddenly become heavy. All of its power disappeared, all of its signals were blocked, and even the circuits of the dynamo core that realized the format connection had been severed one by one. He was no longer a deep blue walker right now. Instead, he was an unlucky bastard who was carrying over 200 kilograms of weight on his back. He had fallen helplessly in front of his target due to castration exhaustion. Snake 7's lower abdomen was kicked in nearly the same position. He flew back a dozen meters and crashed to the ground with a boom. He struggled to climb up, but he saw that the transport vehicle in front of him, which had all of its electronic equipment destroyed by his EMP grenade, actually had its four wheels begin to rotate. It propelled the vehicle to start, change directions, and then accelerate. It continued to travel along the road. In just a moment of stupefaction, the distance had been pulled apart. Jack's voice continued to ring out in the communications channel. "Mr. Yen, as you can see, the dynamo core exists to help people control machinery ever since it was produced. In the hands of a true powerhouse, even a pile of scrap metal can become a terrifying weapon platform. Of course, the most important thing to me is that the configuration of the dynamo core imitates the format of life. Life enters a different form if one is able to control this configuration and obtain enough energy. In a certain sense, it is close to eternal life. Our agreement is still in effect. However, in view of your disappointing behavior, I will propose punitive conditions. I hope that you have a certain amount of mental preparation. The dark red trajectory cut in from the side just as his voice fell, piercing through Fish 2's blazing head. The powerful kinetic energy of the electromagnetic sniper rifle's bullet blew the entire head into smithereens. Blood plasma, brain tissue, and bone fragments splattered in all directions. Snake 7 smashed the ground heavily in the back and roared loudly. However, Jack's calm voice still rang out. It was as cold as a demon's, punitive conditions multiplied by 2. The burning metallic wheat seed seemed to float in the air above the empty exoskeleton armor. It was like the ominous eyes of a demon, casting an ice-cold, mocking light at everyone. Chapter 143. The transport vehicle drove onto the high-speed magnetic track, shaking off the people from Quantum Corporation far, far away. A headless body sat peacefully within the enclosed carriage. Jack's demon eye coldly swept its fiery light over everything within the carriage above the mangled severed neck. The conflict just now had left the interior of the carriage in complete disorder. The two bodies that had originally been placed there had been swung about in a disorderly manner due to inertia. Jack's body was even further inside, and it had knocked into a seat at the side. Rui Wen's body was curled up, and her hands were forcefully pressed together by the electric shackles. She was a bit closer to the demon eye. In truth, Jack had no interest in the other headless corpse, even if it was his previous body. The body that had undergone repeated modifications had lost all meaning when the dynamo core was pulled out. The only emotion that could be aroused was disgust. The same disgust emotion was also applied to the body that he currently possessed. The burner's body was originally pretty good, but half of his body was practically crippled after his exchange with Rui Wen. His left hand was broken, and now even his head had been smashed. He had gone from a fuel tank that could barely provide energy to a tattered water sack that didn't even need to be patched up. What truly provided energy to him now was the Deep Blue Walker's energy system. It was the progenitor stored in the backup energy box. Oh, right. A metal thread as thin as nothing extended out from the mangled severed neck and pierced into the interior of another exoskeleton armor within the carriage. It formed a temporary parallel energy transmission structure. The armor had been removed by Wall 5. The energy box was half full, and there was also a progenitor in reserve. Perfect. The emotion of exclamation was born and threaded through the thin thread structure. It flowed exquisitely and was inconceivably exquisite. As his gaze switched to Rui Wen's body, another kind of emotion was born. It was called greed. The fiery light of the demon eye flowed, causing the thin thread structure to transmit a trembling wave of light. It was continuous. I must have been possessed in the past. Such a perfect body was in front of me, and I actually wanted to destroy it. That bunch of idiots, including me in the past, they simply didn't understand the value of this body. His gaze continuously cut across Rui Wen's body, and he did a deep scan. He saw many swollen and deformed areas caused by high-speed particles piercing and burning. This chapter isn't finished. Please turn the page. Jack's heart ached a bit at the wounds. I'll have to check it in detail when I get back. I hope the radiation didn't cause any irreversible damage. Then, if everything went smoothly, the dynamo core could parasitize this body and carefully arrange its configuration. If it could fuse with Rui Wen's original soul configuration and ability configuration, then that would be ideal. Even if it's a woman, it doesn't matter. She herself represents infinite possibilities. Soul configuration. As his thoughts reached this point, a certain piece of information suddenly popped up, causing Jack to abruptly become alert. His demonic eye abruptly flashed as he instantly switched to many different detection modes. He scanned the interior of the carriage, especially the area around Rui Wen's body, many times. In the end, he converted the signal through the loudspeaker on the exoskeleton armor and said in a humming voice, "Young man, how much longer are you going to hide?" There was silence in the carriage. There was no reply. The demonic eye's flame solidified, locking onto Rue Wen's body. "It looks like you want to protect this girl." In the apartment, the power of your soul configuration was truly amazing. It's laughable that Yen Yongbua and the others still put this ability on Rue Wen. This only reveals their ignorance in the study of souls. The sound of the loudspeaker shook the carriage until it buzzed, but there was still no meaningful information presented. Jack laughed in a low voice. Young people always overestimate their own patience, and at the same time, they also overestimate the patience of others. The exoskeleton armor suddenly punched out, bringing with it the whistling sound of the wind as it directly smashed down on Rue Wen's head. The solid knuckles had already made contact with Rue Wen's temple, so much so that the surface of her skin slightly caved in. But in the end, it still solidified and stopped. Jack maintained this position for a long time, but he still didn't see the expected tetrahedron or any other response. This time, he was truly puzzled. Had he misjudged? Or was this truly Rue Wen's ability? Thinking back to the thorny big guy in the Deshang building, as well as that young man with an extraordinarily large range of perception, Jack's heart was filled with a feeling of anxiety that was difficult to settle down. Yes, even his anxiety had become so real. If the transplant was truly successful, he would undoubtedly become an absolutely real-life existence with boundless prospects. As long as he was given time. At this time, the city's public service system transmitted a message: maintenance of the magnetic track ahead. This chapter has yet to end, please turn the page. Please switch to the traffic level. The next rail change area is 100 meters ahead. The electronic map already showed the route that could be used. Jack's demonic eye flickered once more, and he simply ignored the notification. His speed didn't decrease, but rather increased as he charged straight through. The radio waves of all sorts of obstruction systems, control systems, and authority systems interweaved in the void, all wanting to control this crazily moving transport vehicle. But under the comprehensive control of the dynamo core, all attempts at linking were meaningless. Jack switched the signal to the loudspeaker, using this sort of senseless method to let out a muffled laugh. He was an undefeatable demon king in this intelligent city, no matter what power or direction the brave warriors came from. The feeling of looking down on others and being conceited was pretty good. Pretty good. Oh, this feeling of superiority was 2F** king wonderful. The demonic eye painted the interior of the vehicle with a bloody luster. It was glaring and dazzling, making it hard for people to have a good feeling. Luo Nan watched this bizarre scene, and his heart was strangely calm. Even though Jack was dealing with the situation outside, he never stopped scanning and monitoring the interior of the vehicle. Luo Nan knew of Jack's fear towards Luo Nan. No, it should be said that Jack could see it. Especially under the treacherous and indescribable structure of fine threads before his eyes. Luo Nan had already hidden himself for a long time. He guarded Rue Wen's side from the moment she fell unconscious from the particle cannon strike, falling into the lake. He tried to use the old method to awaken Rue Wen's consciousness and restore her state. But Luo Nan soon discovered that this was a task that was hard to accomplish in a short amount of time. Rue Wen's injuries were far more serious than he had expected. The kinetic energy of the high-speed particles had destroyed many of her internal organs, and it had also destroyed the musical instrument foundation that was assembled into harmony and melody. Forcefully switching the tempo under these circumstances would only cause the backlash to kill everything. Luo Nan could only guard by Rue Wen's side, and at the same time, he urgently contacted the Society's reinforcements. Originally, the members of the Society had been prepared to intercept Quantum Corporation's fleet under He Yuan's arrangements. But Jack's appearance disrupted everyone's plans. The Society's arrangements were being adjusted, and Luo Nan was squatting in the vehicle. He personally witnessed the treacherous and interesting changes in Jack's state. Yes, it was extremely interesting. Chapter 144. A person's emotions and thoughts were rich and colorful. Under normal circumstances, people would only take these words as a description. But at this moment, Jack was truly putting his words into practice. The energy spurred information signals to flow back and forth on the fine thread structure of the dynamo core. Through this special structure, they endlessly combined and converged, colliding and transforming. The final product was thought, emotion, and thought. During this process, the energy did work, emitting multicolored waves of brilliance. Hidden within it was some sort of unique law and rhythm, flickering and flickering. The law was consistent, but the rhythm was random. The two core elements of stillness and movement combined together to form the rhythm of life that people had to face squarely. It was no longer a rigid template. Instead, it was undoubtedly the pulsation of the soul. Perhaps it was just as Jack said. His life had entered a completely new form because of the existence of this structure. Luo Nan felt that he was watching an educational film about the nature of the soul. From a materialistic point of view, people's consciousness and emotions could be understood simply as a series of neurotransmitters, the conduction of electrical signals, and the collective action of motivation and avoidance mechanisms that humans had formed over a long period of evolution. But many frontline researchers had always believed that there was a deeper reason for the marvelous activities of human consciousness. There should be a more essential model that integrated these signals and mechanisms with a special structure. A highly efficient system. It was greater than the sum of its parts. The soul originated from this. As a possessor of extraordinary strength and a believer of formatting theory, Luo Nan approved of this view. Frankly speaking, the word soul configuration from Jack's mouth was truly a wonderful word. It was faintly similar to the meaning of formatting. It was three-dimensional and vivid. But in reality, it was easier said than done to find such an information integration system and present it with an intuitive and exquisite geometric structure. To a large extent, it could only be a kind of fantasy in a reasonable sense. But Luo Nan actually found something similar at this moment. That's right. It was the fine thread structure of the dynamo core supported by the energy of the two exoskeleton armors, with Jack's demon eye as the center. Though it was crude, though it was only a fragment, Luo Nan used his unique point of view to observe it in the air. What he saw was, this chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. It was a magnificent building. Energy and information that could be sensed and measured on the material plane traveled between this building. From low to high, they intersected and collided, climbing step by step. From simple thoughts and basic emotions, they transformed into high-level thoughts and emotions, all the way to the palace of pure spirit. Yes, this was a Tower of Babel built from the material plane to the spiritual plane of nothingness. Though it belonged to Jack, it didn't stop Luo Nan from appreciating its marvels and clapping his hands in admiration. It was also because of his understanding and appreciation of this mystery that he had touched upon the essence of it. In a practical sense, all of Jack's activities in this Tower of Babel, including thoughts, emotions, and thoughts, were under Luo Nan's clairvoyance. There were practically no secrets to speak of. Therefore, Jack's probing and threats just now were extremely laughable in Luo Nan's eyes. If Jack really did discover him, Luo Nan would have sensed him even earlier than Jack. Luo Nan was both amused and vigilant. Energy and information can be received on the mental and material planes at the same time. Perhaps it's more efficient. But if it's too pure, it will break away from neurotransmitters and other chemical matter carriers. It's the same as losing the inherent password lock of the human body. Everything will be completely exposed to a higher level of clairvoyance. It's like a bonfire in the night. It can dispel the darkness, but it can also attract unknown dangers. Just like the current Jack. He didn't know that there was someone who was using a godlike perspective to see through all of his thoughts and actions. Though his emotions weren't quite used to the sudden change in his life form and appeared to be overly intense, his logic wasn't affected. He was fully aware that he was surrounded by enemies on all sides in this city. He first planned his route after breaking through the first obstacle. He made the transport vehicle go all the way down, preparing to return to the recycling stratum that he was most familiar with. Then he began to make preparations for the fierce battle to break out of the encirclement. He quickly dismantled the other exoskeleton armor, as well as his own corpse. Jack's train of thought was very clear. As an altered human, his previous body was equipped with many extremely effective and precise instruments. There were even some that the Deep Blue platform didn't possess. He needed to do his best to integrate these instruments together in order to display a greater effect. For him, this was very easy. He just needed to split the dynamo core into a thin thread. If this chapter isn't finished, please turn the page. The instruments and components seemed to possess a life of their own. Their information was closely linked to each other. All he needed to do was a bit of structural design work. Luo Nan shook his head in his mind as he watched the progress of Jack's work. From his perspective, Jack's direction was completely wrong. The true use of the Tower of Babel was to build a bridge from the material to the mental, to break the barrier between the body and the soul. But Jack's transformation, even though it greatly increased his combat strength, was at most equivalent to piling up a military fortress at the bottom of this grand building. Compared to the main body of the Tower of Babel that connected the heavens and the earth, what use was there in making that low fortress even more sturdy? Jack's entire emotional thought process was still exposed to the light of day. His soul, which had already obtained a new life, was still not completely calm. It was still affected by intense emotional fluctuations. Jack hadn't solved a single truly fatal problem. It looked like Jack had told Yan Yongbua that the dynamo core technology wasn't complete. It was indeed a very honest performance. Luo Nan's mind stirred slightly when he thought of this. His soul body slowly descended from a position far away from the material plane. He extended his hand towards Jack. Perhaps, he just needed to lightly clench. The fingertips of his soul body lightly touched the membrane of the material plane. It was as if he was lightly tapping on the calm surface of a deep pool. Fine ripples that were hard to detect rose. Jack's demon eyes suddenly flashed. His seated body sprang up, bringing with it a few ragged and tattered components that hadn't been completely pieced together. A burst of clanking noises rang out. When these noises passed, the vehicle was covered in a nearly frozen silence. Jack maintained this posture for a full minute, but Luo Nan had already returned to the deepest depths that the mental plane could reach. He didn't give Jack any chance to discover anything. After confirming that it was already impossible to lock onto the suspicious signal, Jack sat down once more. He muttered to himself for a moment before picking up the multi-pronged helmet that he had been ignoring all this time. At the same time, the dynamo core separated a thin line to pull the idle electronic eye system over. Approximately 2 minutes later, the modified helmet was once again connected to the torso of the armor. After the original diamond-shaped strengthening panel, the electronic eye lit up with a dark red glow. Luo Nan laughed when he saw this scene. Chapter 145. Jack, who was wearing a helmet, could be seen as a mighty deep blue walker if it weren't for the many useless components hanging on his body. However, this deep blue walker's mind was on the verge of collapse. The suspicious signal gave him an intense uneasiness. It wasn't that easy to dispel. The installation of the electronic eye was just the beginning. There were many advanced detection devices within Jack's previous shell. They were all dismantled and integrated into the exoskeleton armor. Jack constantly turned his head as the installation process progressed. He let the electronic eye guide the detection devices on his entire body, surveying the interior and exterior of the vehicle over and over again. However, no matter how many times he surveyed, Jack was never able to capture the suspicious signal. But on the other hand, every reconnaissance and detection couldn't be said to be completely meaningless. It was through this method that a huge amount of data passed through the Tower of Babel. The unique structure of the Tower of Babel realized a highly efficient convergence and combination. Every survey represented a deeper level of understanding of this world for Jack. This was something Jack had never experienced before. Luo Nan's evaluation of this was, Jack got on the right track. Jack's remodeling train of thought had clearly changed after being frightened by Luo Nan. He no longer pursued an immediate increase in combat strength. Instead, he integrated and set up as many detection and scanning devices as possible to guard against that invisible and shadowless threat. From Luo Nan's perspective, this remodeling model was closer to the essence of configuration than the previous Battle Fortress style of remodeling. Through the enhancement of perception and cognitive ability, the source and level of information were constantly enriched, and the integration of thoughts was strengthened. From the low to the high, from the concrete to the abstract, this grand Tower of Babel climbed to the absolute mental domain. In the long run, if Jack persisted in this remodeling method, he would certainly have some gains. It would be easier for him to display his strength on the mental plane. Was Luo Nan helping Jack make a breakthrough? Clearly not. The reason why Luo Nan was happy with Jack's changes was because Jack himself had a nearly irreparable mistake. His emotional thought processes were currently without any defenses. It would be very hard to find a suitable carrier for them in a short amount of time. Whether it was emotions or thoughts, they were both the foundation of the soul. Please continue to the next page if this chapter doesn't end. Jack's soul was completely defenseless. At least in Luo Nan's eyes, it was incomparably weak. The reason Luo Nan didn't make his move before was because Jack still retained a good habit. He did his best to maintain his consciousness and body at a synchronized tempo. It was like Rui Wen's body and soul fusion. She possessed a powerful defense against attacks on the mental plane. However, this kind of synchronized rhythm was also very demanding. Even someone as strong as Rui Wen had to constantly adjust the state of her body and maintain a calm and tranquil state of mind at all times. Only then could she maintain her peak performance in the midst of an intense battle. Compared to Rui Wen, the current Jack had a large range of mood swings. At the same time, he was incessantly altering his temporary body. His train of thought was different from before and after. Even if he had the dynamo core as a mediator, there was still a high probability that he would come apart. As Jack found the right direction and continued to increase his soul power and level, the fort-like modifications that had failed earlier would have a more and more serious impact on the synchronization rhythm. Perhaps Jack would eventually discover the problem, but Ronan wasn't prepared to give him the chance to solve it. If the boundary between the material plane and the spiritual plane was seen as a water surface, Jack, the fat fish in the material plane, was constantly emerging from the water surface to breathe fresh air. Luo Nan was like a patient hunter, waiting for his prey to emerge from the water the most. He had even prepared a specialized weapon for his prey. The wraith sign at the tip of the heavily chained crow emitted a faint light. The weapon Luo Nan had prepared was obviously the siege hammer. The human-faced arachnid's direct participation was unavoidable in order to guarantee its effectiveness. However, there was a bit of change at this time. It was outside of Luo Nan's plans. The human-faced arachnid, who was in the midst of recuperation, changed its attitude of disdain towards Jack and became a bit restless. Following the transformation of Jack's life form, the Darksider life form's view of Jack's nature changed from completely unpalatable to perhaps it can be tasted. The most important thing was that a spiritual seed was being nurtured in the depths of Jack's soul. Admittedly, it was far inferior to Rui Wen's untainted by a speck of dust. It was pure and translucent in degree. But even if it was meat that had gone bad, it could still be eaten with a sprinkle of chili powder. The human-faced arachnid disregarded its current weak state and struggled once more. It transformed into a somewhat illusory form. Please turn the page if this chapter doesn't end. Its master expressed a strong desire to eat. Luo Nan was a bit hesitant. While Luo Nan was pondering, the Hexier transmitted information to the mental plane through the psychic wave network. It was received by Luo Nan's soul body. It was the same format of energy and information. It was the same format of shuttling between the material plane and the mental plane. What the Hexier did far exceeded Jack's current level. It could be confirmed that the energy and information were encoded. At the very least, ordinary eavesdropping wouldn't affect it. However, although the transmission of psychic waves was secretive, it wasn't untraceable. Especially this sort of special waveband that transitioned from the material plane to the mental plane. It was like a gentle breeze blowing across the surface of a lake. It would more or less leave behind some special ripples on the material plane. Luo Nan didn't feel this before, but after grasping the knack of soul breathing, he became more and more sensitive to this aspect. He immediately furrowed his brows. This was because Jack wasn't a normal person. This bit of weak ripple didn't escape Jack's eyes and ears under the gradually upgraded and pervasive probing. All sorts of probing instruments converged in an instant. All sorts of active probing wavebands practically burned a hole in the void. But this was useless. Luo Nan's current soul body possessed an absolute advantage on the mental plane. He could explore an even deeper and more subtle level. In comparison, Jack's artificial instruments were far too crude even if they could truly probe the mental plane. Whether it was precision or breadth, they were far from being able to capture Luo Nan. So Luo Nan could calmly receive the signal and use this sort of method to provoke Jack's sensitive nerves. He Yuan transmitted, "Scout. The target has been locked on. Your soul-bonded crow can rest for now. Pay attention to the various sniper positions in the surroundings. Mr. Bai will contact you in a moment." Cragburst's muffled laughter transmitted over. Clearly, he had seen through He Yuan's scheme of using her power for private gain. Luo Nan ignored He Yuan's suggestion and willfully let his soul-bonded crow fly all the way from Dashang Building. The distance was nearly 50 kilometers, but it only took him less than half an hour to get there. The crow's speed had already broken 100. No matter how one looked at it, this was an overdraft of the crow's physical strength. It was very likely that it would lead to unpredictable consequences for the soul-bonded state. He couldn't blame He Yuan for using this sort of method to express her dissatisfaction. Chapter 146. The heavens above, Luo Nan was quite innocent right now. Not to mention the fact that he wasn't even in a soul attachment state. Ink had successfully merged with the external airflow environment under the blessing of the soul-breathing technique he had comprehended. Its body of crow feathers seemed to melt together with the night sky. When it flapped its wings to fly, it practically had the ability to ride the wind. Its physical strength consumption was minuscule. It was unknown how satisfied it was. All right, Luo Nan never expected that the blessing of soul breathing would have such a good effect. It clearly didn't increase Ink's upper limit, but it created an incomparable state for Ink, allowing it to display 150% of its ability. Luo Nan had secretly learned from Rui Wen. It was no wonder that Rui Wen was able to achieve such godly results with her skinny body. Sometimes, perfect coordination was even more crucial than absolute strength. No matter what Luo Nan thought, He Yuan was the supreme commander of this operation. He had to listen to her orders. He could only order Ink to fly to the area designated by He Yuan. He Yuan maintained a high standard of work as a secretary. She knew that Luo Nan probably didn't quite understand what a sniper position was. She even sent over a satellite image of the surrounding area, marking out the locations Luo Nan needed to be responsible for. She even gave suggestions on the patrol route. Such meticulous work left one speechless. As Ink spread its wings and flew out, it entered the predetermined location. The Society's adjusted operational layout officially entered the implementation stage. At this moment, psychic waves emitted by the Hexier, the main channel of communication, covered an area of several dozen square kilometers. They converged into a densely woven large net outside the range of perception of a normal person, and they began to rapidly converge. Luo Nan was located in the center of the large net, and he could clearly feel the layers of intersecting psychic waves. The ripples on the surface of the water grew even clearer. Clearly, these changes couldn't be hidden from Jack. His mood became even more restless. The crisscrossing psychic waves completely destroyed his search for suspicious signals because there were suspicious signals all around him right now. Jack understood that he was already surrounded. After completing the transformation of his life form, a few negative effects finally arrived. Jack knew that being restless was useless, but he was unable to block off these emotions. The encirclement of the Society's forces was an expected result. Jack didn't need to react so excessively. In the end, it was Luo Nan's provocation that left him with an extremely bad experience. It was like a scattered wheat seed. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. The wheat seed began to sprout under the watering pressure from all sides. It grew rapidly, devouring the nutrients that originally belonged to his core willpower. The arrogance and conceit from before had long flown off to who knows where. Jack punched the partition of the carriage and began to clean up the equipment that had not been fully installed. His efficiency was much lower than expected. Of course, this debt was also placed on Luo Nan's head. Although Jack didn't know who was behind that suspicious signal. Jack's reaction was quite interesting, but on Luo Nan's side, the human-faced arachnid's reaction was in no way inferior. See, the more anxious Jack became, the more restless the human-faced arachnid became. Even though it didn't possess intelligence, its hunger instinct still transmitted a relatively clear message. Translated, it was roughly saying, "Don't tease him like that. The spiritual seed's nutrition has decreased again." It didn't seem like it was going to swallow it directly. Luo Nan's mind stirred. Under his stimulation, Jack's sensitivity towards the mental plane had increased by an unknown amount. It was to the extent that he was able to sense the encirclement of the Society ahead of time. Even though Luo Nan believed in Yuan's leadership, Rue Wen was by Jack's side. With Jack's terrible ability to control his emotions, it was better to add another layer of insurance for the sake of safety. Luo Nan finally loosened the chain, and the human-faced arachnid lost its restraints. It immediately broke out in joy and threw itself straight at Jack. It must be said that Jack's abilities on the mental plane had really made great progress after Luo Nan's stimulation and tempering. In the past, he didn't have any ability to detect the human-faced arachnid, a Darksider life form. But now, a certain intuition made him tense up the moment the human-faced arachnid threw itself at him. It was the probing assemblage that could practically melt the void. Unfortunately, it was still useless. Jack's completely exposed emotional thought process was an irreparable weakness. And the human-faced arachnid's assault method even exceeded Luo Nan's imagination. The human-faced arachnid really didn't bite down with a "ah-woo." Jack was still in the synchronized rhythm of his body and soul, so he still possessed a certain level of defense. This Darksider life form possessed a cunning instinct. It avoided a frontal confrontation, and its already weak body instantly transformed into nothingness. Its core essence actually transformed into a minuscule piece of information. This information was captured by Jack's probing apparatus on all sides. And this was it. This chapter has yet to end. Please turn the page. Jack was thrown into a completely defenseless emotional thought process. Luo Nan watched in stupefaction. The human-faced arachnid transformed into information under the drive of energy. It roamed within the Tower of Babel and collided with other information. A reaction occurred in an instant, flashing with a kind of dark tinge of emotional luster. Luo Nan immediately deciphered that this was impatience. This bit of impatient emotional element quickly merged into Jack's corresponding emotional torrent. It followed the structure of the Tower of Babel up level by level. Soon, it seeped into a higher level of thought. In this way, the human-faced arachnid was like a kind of virus. It gradually seeped into Jack's soul. This was a fact that Luo Nan found hard to imagine, but he had witnessed it with his own eyes. The human-faced arachnid began its official work after making contact with Jack's soul. The first thing it did was to weed out. It callously and mercilessly ate all the emotional weeds that helped it enter Jack's higher-level thought process. They were fighting over the nutrients of Jack's core willpower. Then it dove head-first into the depths of Jack's soul. The human-faced arachnid found its final target in the abyss where self-awareness was hard to reach. It seeped with the color of blood and desire, yet it also had layers of faint halos of light. The human-faced arachnid stared greedily at this edible food, but it didn't make any follow-up movements. It just hid nearby, waiting silently. As for Jack, after a series of warning omens that made his heart palpitate, he suddenly discovered that the irritating impatient emotions had suddenly been blown away. This was a change that had no reason at all. But the fatal pressure was the best reason. In any case, his mind had recovered its calmness once more. He was able to face the imminent crisis. His gaze fell upon Rui Wen. He understood that the source of everything was this girl that he had monitored for 3 years. He had tortured her for 3 years. Jack extended his hand. No matter what, he wanted to control Rui Wen in his hands. And at this time, the high-speed moving transport vehicle suddenly swayed sideways. The magnitude of the swing was so great that it simply made people believe that the vehicle had been violently warped. In reality, the vehicle, which was pieced together from solid bulletproof steel plates, had indeed been severely warped. Then it was torn apart. Apologies. Updating the settings has failed. I only discovered it now. There's still a chapter ahead. Everyone, don't forget to subscribe. Also, what the hell is with the initial order being lower than the later chapters? Chapter 147. Jack's fingers, which were about to touch Rui Wen's body, suddenly pulled away at least 2 meters from his target. The darkness of the night outside the car was like a muddy river, suddenly lying horizontally between him and Rui Wen. See, impossible. Jack's mind instantly calculated the terrifying and absurd amount of energy needed to forcibly tear apart a bulletproof steel plate. Using the simplest logical deduction, this energy could be blasted in the most efficient way possible. It could completely penetrate him in one hit. Jack's self-awareness glowed with brilliance in a single thought, dispersing the strange power acting on his mental plane. In an instant, the warped and cracked car and the darkness of the night between him and Rui Wen all transformed into fluctuating mottled colors. With a slight spin, they dissipated without a trace. The car had indeed swayed sideways and crashed into the abandoned ground floor of a building, but it wasn't as serious as he'd felt before. At this time, all levels of detection equipment had long since transmitted the information of the EMP electromagnetic attack, but he was completely unaware. Mental illusion. I can also be affected by illusion. An indescribably complex mood churned, then instantly chilled. Because Jack had just been affected by the illusion and electromagnetic attack, his body's reaction was erroneous. In the severe swaying of the car, he had already thrown off the distance between him and Rui Wen. His back pressed against the wall of the car, wanting to borrow the force to spring up and grab Rui Wen's protective artifact. At this time, the car behind him made a ping sound. See, the sound was oppressive and heavy. The peerlessly strange power transmitted from the outside of the car, almost without any damage, directly into the exoskeleton armor, into the half-decayed body. The vibrating power seemed to radiate outward from the chest of the body. The tightly arranged configuration of the dynamo core trembled slightly. This time, his body was actually shaken to the point of freezing on the spot. The second ping sound came, the front force and the back force overlapping. The two different vibrations intersected and stimulated each other. The structure of the half of the body that had already decayed due to Rue Wen's deathly stillness ability completely collapsed, turning into a meaningless dead bag of skin. It even affected the other half of the body, causing the fine threads of the dynamo core to have to be rearranged. Therefore, Jack still couldn't move. Then came the third ping sound. Jack's ice-cold mask. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Then, the demon eye suddenly flashed. The omnidirectional detection instrument had already formed an image of the carriage and projected it back. Outside was a short and stocky middle-aged man wearing a casual short-sleeved shirt. However, his arms were so swollen that even the cuffs on his upper arms were torn. At this moment, he was punching the outer wall of the carriage. What was strange was that the power of his fist caused Jack, who was in the carriage, to be battered and exhausted, but the place where his fist landed was as flat as before. At least a B-class martial artist. When this judgment was formed, dark red flames burned from Jack's decaying body inside the exoskeleton armor. From the inside to the outside, it lit up the surroundings with a loud bang. In an instant, the body inside the exoskeleton armor turned to ash, but the format of fire wasn't affected in the slightest. Through the amplification of the armor, it gushed out from his back. The bulletproof iron plate on the back of the carriage had a radius of about 1 meter, and it was instantly covered in high temperature. Under the convergence of the archetype format, the astonishing heat did not spread at all and was transmitted to the outer layer of the carriage. A muffled groan came from outside the carriage. The large-armed martial artist's fist was scorched black by the high temperature, especially by the power of the format of fire. His third strike was forcibly interrupted, and his figure flashed backwards. Jack finally regained his freedom. He didn't care about the exhaustion caused by the instantaneous eruption. He turned around to grab Rue Wen, but at this moment, he saw the rear of the carriage explode open. The big fellow, Crag Burst, who he had exchanged blows with before, charged in while laughing loudly. He disregarded everything and engaged in close combat. "I'm done for." Jack knew that he no longer had the strength to snatch Rue Wen into his hands. His demon eye instantly dimmed, but it immediately brightened once more. Even if I don't have Rue Wen, I still have the dynamo core. I still have energy. I haven't failed. Within the open carriage, the two beast-like experts instantly engaged in close combat. The bursting power made it seem as if this 5-ton transport vehicle could topple over at any moment. The rescue operation was already over at this moment. It was surprisingly straightforward and efficient. The personnel deployed in the surroundings appeared one after another, surrounding the transport vehicle. It was like catching a turtle in a jar. He Yuan stood beneath a concrete pillar in the abandoned area. She calmly observed the current situation. A small old man stood loosely by her side. He yawned incessantly. It was the large-armed martial artist who had just played a crucial role. "Please turn the page if this chapter isn't finished." He walked back. His arm had already returned to its normal limits. It was only a bit thicker than an ordinary person's. He swung his injured arm and sighed with emotion. "Secretary, you really are daring. You used an illusion technique on an altered human that was neither human nor ghost, and you succeeded." Daydream. Not bad. Daydream was the veteran psychic of the Xia City branch, Mr. White. He yawned again when he heard what was said. He shook his head and said, "This person's mood fluctuates greatly. His defense is surprisingly sloppy. He's inferior to an ordinary person to a certain degree. Of course, his logical abilities are extremely strong, and he recovers quickly. But as long as the first step is hit, the subsequent steps won't be a problem. Yuan slightly bowed towards the large-armed martial artist. I just exchanged a bit of information with Quantum Corporation. You've worked hard, Mr. Giant Arm. If it weren't for your 2 successful strikes, things wouldn't have gone so smoothly. I'm ashamed. Originally, I was going to hit with 3 strikes. I didn't think that this altered human's format of fire could be controlled to this degree. Crag Burst was blasted out amidst the explosion of flames as he spoke. No matter how valiant Crag Burst was, he was still made of flesh and blood. Compared to Jack, who was a complete metal construct, Crag Burst suffered quite a bit. Jack blasted Crag Burst back with a single strike and walked out with large strides. He landed in the center of the empty space and faced the dozen or so veteran awakened of the Ability User Society. There was a great disparity between the strong and the weak, but he was fearless. This boldness made people have a whole new level of respect for him. However, Luo Nan, who was observing from the sky, was a bit embarrassed. What the hell is the human-faced arachnid doing? From Luo Nan's perspective, at least half of the credit for Jack's current performance could be attributed to the human-faced arachnid. It was precisely this fellow that lay in wait in the depths of Jack's soul. It endlessly guided the direction of Jack's emotions and eliminated nearly all of the negative elements. This allowed Jack to fight more and more bravely, bursting forth with the fierceness from the depths of his heart. Because of the burden of the human-faced arachnid, Luo Nan seemed to be on the same side as Jack. Right now, the human-faced arachnid was extremely excited. Its bizarre and unfathomable instincts were currently urging it to bring out the most valuable portion of Jack's soul strength and pour it into the spiritual seed before its eyes. Right now, it wasn't like a savage Darksider species. Instead, it was like a diligent gardener. The spiritual seed before its eyes was gradually washed of its lustful bloodlust and blossomed with a radiance that grew brighter and brighter. Chapter 148. Jack had never felt so good before. Even though he was besieged, even though Ruiwen had been snatched away, the pressure had stimulated all of his potential. The configuration of the dynamo core even more so allowed him to see how energy and information could truly operate with high efficiency. The same information was converged and analyzed, but he was able to see the unprecedented angle and content. Even when he was in the most passive position, he could grasp the most detailed changes in the situation without any hesitation or confusion. Because of this, he had nothing to fear. Apart from the external, there was also the internal. Jack could sense that the strength of the dynamo core was being held back by his crude steel body design. It was only able to bring out a very small portion of its power. But this didn't make him depressed. On the contrary, it encouraged and motivated him. As long as he could charge out, his future would be limitless. The glorious prospect had ignited the true flames in his heart. The internal energy of the format coiled and coiled, making contact with the flames and igniting anew. The color of the format of fire was even brighter and carried a faint golden edge. The twisted patterns in the air and the flames formed a marvelous archetype format. It displayed a mysterious and profound pattern, but it gradually disappeared as it accumulated even more power. Jack unsheathed his close combat sword. The format of fire spread to the blade, rippling with a layer of distorted rainbow light. Wherever the blade pointed, even the Society's aptitude users who had the absolute upper hand had to squint their eyes. Paw, Giant Arm clapped his hands against Jack, whose aura was rising. I thought you were just a peddler who harmed children, but now it seems that you're a very ruthless human trafficker. The piles of bones under the Deshang building were all used by a lunatic like you to train your courage, right? The demonic eyes behind Jack's multi-edged helmet shot out a cold glare. Every dead person has a specific recovery procedure. Bones and such have never been left. Jack laughed out loud when the Giant Arm paused. At first, it was just the sound of the signal being transferred to the loudspeaker. Later, it was the sound of pure flames surging and exploding, shaking the entire abandoned floor. Luo Nan retreated a bit deeper into the mental plane as Jack laughed loudly. It wasn't because of Jack, but because of Mr. Daydream Bai, who stood by He Yuan's side. This wasn't the first time Luo Nan had heard of Mr. Bai, the psychic. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. It was a well-deserved reputation. Unbeknownst to him, there was already a thin layer of mist flowing on the spiritual plane. It gradually thickened and silently opened up a domain that belonged to him on the spiritual plane, and it permeated towards Jack's direction. While Jack was talking nonsense, Mr. White had already launched an attack on him. Luo Nan had seen it before. It was when Jack was attacked by the illusion technique. The smoke itself was a lot of fine and fuzzy inductive information. It cut into the material plane from the mental plane. Jack was defenseless and exceptionally sharp in the Tower of Babel. The smoke wantonly created illusions. The effects were extremely miraculous. But now, the situation seemed to have changed. Jack's babble was still defenseless, but the rhythm of the flow of energy and information had been completely elevated to another level. Before, it was a surging tide. Now, it was a crazily leaping flame. His speed, efficiency, and strength had all been raised to an astonishing level. If they wanted to deceive him with false information, they could, but they had to be as crazy as he was. This was not Mr. White's forte. So the flame broke through the encirclement of the mist in a mere breath of time. It even seized the opportunity to charge upwards. It wantonly flourished on the mental plane, and the light of the flame soared. Mr. White grunted, and the smoke slowly dispersed. Luo Nan unconsciously narrowed his eyes. This was a purely subconscious action, but he could see just how dazzling Jack's soul aura was right now. This sort of unreserved, unconcealed, and wantonly eruption of light could only appear in a special situation like Jack's. Luo Nan didn't know why, but a very inappropriate feeling grew in his heart. He saw Mr. White at this time, and his brows furrowed for a moment. His body subconsciously took half a step back. Actually, Luo Nan also took a step back. He tried to hide a bit deeper on the mental plane. This time, it was all because of Jack. Presumably, Mr. White's feelings were similar to Luo Nan's. Jack's light was too dazzling. People who were used to appearing and disappearing on the mental plane certainly liked the sort of private feeling of knowing others not knowing. But Jack was doing the complete opposite. It was just like, oh. A sudden chill suddenly descended, and the inappropriate feeling in Luo Nan's heart suddenly became even more substantial. It was also here. Please continue to the next page if this chapter doesn't end. In this moment, a buzzing sound penetrated through. The heavily chained crow suddenly collapsed, emitting an extremely subtle trembling sound to warn him. The human-faced arachnid, which had been plowing and waiting in the abyss of Jack's soul all this time, also changed its state. It circled around the spiritual seed, carrying restlessness amidst its fierceness. Luo Nan's thoughts rose under the stimulation of all sorts of ominous omens. His field of view was no longer limited to a corner. Instead, it expanded with all its might until it reached its limit. There were no abnormalities within a radius of 1 kilometer. But a bit further away, ink was flying idly in the vicinity of the so-called sniper position. Its feathers suddenly exploded. It let out a coarse squawk and dove down, fleeing in a panic. It was a hair too late. A certain fleeting shadow cut in and out of the tiny range of Luo Nan's senses, disappearing into the chaotic and fuzzy darkness. Ink! Luo Nan didn't have enough time to rush over. He could only rely on his only employee. Ink displayed superb flying skills under his command. It continuously changed its route, flying a circle around the complex region near the sniper position. A short 3 seconds later, the fleeting shadow re-entered the range of Ink's senses. It floated in the void right now, not paying any attention to the crows fluttering nearby. It just lined up its 2 eyes side by side, and its strange gaze of 6 heterochromatic pupils pointed at the location of Luo Nan and the others. Its gaze was filled with greed and hunger. Luo Nan instantly understood where that inappropriate feeling came from. That's right. Jack's completely defenseless mode of energy and information. Jack's emotions and thought processes were completely exposed. There was also the ceaseless sharpening and the rapid increase in his soul strength. Although this fellow didn't have any accomplishments on the mental plane, the willful eruption of soul radiance was just as Luo Nan had described. It was like a bonfire in the night. Only the heavens knew what sort of danger it would attract. Now the answer had appeared. Human-faced arachnid. Another human-faced arachnid. This was absolutely an enormous variable. Luo Nan was just about to report this to He Yueyin when Ink's range of senses suddenly darkened. A powerful pulse swept past. The energy, information, and corresponding tempo contained within it instantly exceeded the limits of what Luo Nan's senses could bear. The mental plane suddenly shook violently in the next moment. A whistling and surging hurricane came from nowhere, sweeping everything that Luo Nan could sense. Chapter 149. Tonight, Luo Nan had witnessed 2 EMP electromagnetic bombs explode. No matter what the effects were, he could see that people always hoped to destroy the enemy's eyes, ears, and mobility before engaging in combat. Then they could reap the harvest calmly. However, Luo Nan never imagined that he would actually encounter a method similar to an electromagnetic attack on the mental plane. The hurricane that came out of nowhere was stirring up trouble on the boundary between the mental plane and the material plane. The first to be destroyed was the psychic wave network built between the members of the association. Luo Nan's message to He Yueyin flew to who knows where halfway. Then Luo Nan's mental senses received an attack. Whether it was range or precision, everything was suppressed again and again. Luo Nan discovered that he could only sense an area of 30 meters around him in a daze. The range had shrunk by over 10 times, and the precision was too horrible to look at. Luo Nan discovered that he was still fine. Mr. Bai's situation was even worse than his. This little old man's appearance was more like he had been targeted. Traces of blood flowed out from the corners of his eyes and nostrils. He was even a bit unsteady on his feet. He leaned back against a pillar to prevent himself from falling down in a sorry state. This should be a spiritual storm in the truest sense of the word. It almost destroyed and overturned all existences on the spiritual plane, instantly clearing the area. Luo Nan couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. Just what stage had the human-faced arachnid grown to? The only thing worth rejoicing about was that Luo Nan's connection with Ink, the human-faced arachnid, and Ruewen had not been severed through the format pyramid. Luo Nan was even able to send a bit of support to Ink through the air. The light waves of the format pyramid hidden behind the black feather comforted the frightened little fellow. Correspondingly, the human-faced arachnid, which was even sharper than him, transmitted a warning message to a certain degree. In this way, Luo Nan knew that the human-faced arachnid, which had stopped in the air above the sniping position, had already swept over in this chaotic situation. Okay, this was a bit confusing. Luo Nan gave his human-faced arachnid a nickname, Wraith Sign. Even if it had a nickname, the Wraith Sign, which lacked spiritual intelligence, couldn't provide any more information. It didn't know anything about the route or the speed. But Luo Nan knew that the enemy's most likely target was still Jack. Jack was the only person who didn't suffer from the mental storm just now. Such preferential treatment was not given to Jack, but to the constantly growing spiritual seed. Jack still did not know what was going on. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. His unbridled soul radiance had attracted this storm. He didn't even know that he had struck the jackpot and was being targeted by two human-faced arachnids at the same time. Even though he didn't receive the attack, he could still sense it the moment the storm started. He immediately made a decision. Laughter and the rumbling of flames didn't stop. He raised the alloy combat blade horizontally and brazenly charged. He thought his chance had come. This was indeed his chance. Because of the mental storm, the psychic wave network had been severed. All the ability users were stunned, and their reactions were slower by more than a beat. However, as the commander of this operation, Yuan still maintained a high speed of thought. Giant Arm. Only calling him by his code name without any honorifics meant that the situation was urgent. As the strongest person on the scene, Giant Arms knew that the current situation was strange, but he also knew that he had to take responsibility. Almost as soon as Yuan gave the order, he exerted his strength to fly, only a bit slower than Jack. Giant Arms' line and angle were absolutely perfect. He flew from the side, found a short path, and stabbed straight at Jack's flank. His two arms suddenly swelled, causing the cuffs of his short sleeves to completely collapse. His arms were bare, and a heavy fist was imprinted in front of him. Jack didn't even turn his head. The exoskeleton armor swung its tail, facing Giant Arm from the side. It became the back of his head. Most importantly, the nozzle on his back suddenly opened. Disregarding the damage to his body, he forcefully pushed it to the highest gear and spat out a deep blue flame. The terrifyingly high temperature made Giant Arm let out a muffled groan. He forcefully withdrew his strength and dodged, but Jack raised his speed to the highest. The alloy combat blade didn't have any fancy tricks. It was a simple stab forward, and there wasn't a body of flesh and blood that could block the flames of the format of fire. Where the edge of the blade pointed, the waves split. It was originally a thin layer of encirclement, but without the unified command of the psychic wave network, it was like a plate of loose sand. It was pierced through in an instant. Right now, the deep blue walker exoskeleton armor's feet didn't touch the ground. With the assistance of the auxiliary thrusters, it shot toward the window of the abandoned floor that led to the outside world. Giant Arm, Crag burst, and the others strove to catch up, but it was an impossible task to compete with the exoskeleton armor with its thrusters fully activated. The window continued to enlarge in front of Jack. It swallowed him and released him, allowing him to be cast into the night of Xia City's recycling stratum. There was an explosive rumble. The wall at the edge of the window was bombarded by Giant Arm's fist, which was a step too late. The wall instantly collapsed. The flying rubble collapsed outwards, but it was swept to dust in front of the format of fire. It was a success. From now on, the sky was high and the sea was wide. Birds flew and fish leaped. Please turn the page if this chapter isn't finished. Jack raised his head to look at the night sky of Xia City. Under the blurry colors of light, his longing and dreams vaguely transformed into a stairway to heaven. It dropped down from high in the sky all the way to his feet. Right now, the flames in his heart were burning at their most intense. Ripples formed in the void. With Jack's current level, his interference with the mental and material planes had already reached a very high precision. Naturally, this kind of change couldn't be hidden from him. However, the human-faced arachnid stepped out of nothingness. It didn't give Jack any time to react. The malevolent and terrifying specter was practically sticking face to face. It silently penetrated Jack's exoskeleton armor. Jack's consciousness of fear hadn't even risen yet. Right now, he was still displaying ecstasy and pride on the outside. His emotions were like exploding flames. However, the human-faced arachnid burned with the same bewitching demonic fire. It instantly covered Jack's entire body. At this moment, under the illumination of the format of fire, the specter of the human-faced arachnid clearly and completely overlapped with Jack's. The dense shadow seeped into the soaring soul fire. The fierce and ugly mouth opened wide, accurately capturing the spiritual seed that seemed to be on the verge of igniting in the depths of Jack's soul. The arachnid bit down and swallowed it. Jack's charging figure suddenly froze and the glow of his demonic eye dimmed. In the eyes of the pursuing ability users, the exoskeleton armor, which had already flown into the air, lost control. It fell headfirst to the ground. While Giant Arms and Crag Burst were stunned, the sound of wind suddenly rose behind them. Another person leaped out of the window. A slender figure streaked across the sky, brushing past the rapidly falling exoskeleton armor. Man and blade became one. The light of the format of fire flickered intensely as it pointed straight at the seemingly empty curtain of night. After the curtain of night, the human-faced arachnid had just eaten a delicious meal. It was smacking its mouth to savor it when the blade light arrived. Yuan. Her target wasn't Jack, but the human-faced arachnid. At this moment, Mr. Bai, who had been standing next to her just now, temporarily took over Yuan's command. He endured the pain of his wounded soul and loudly reported the situation. Human-faced arachnid has been discovered. Third contingency plan. Luo Nan was shaken on the mental plane when his voice rang out. This was because he saw another hurricane that spanned the material plane and the mental plane at this very moment. It whistled over. Right now the human-faced arachnid was dodging Yuan's blade light with all its strength. It absolutely didn't have any spare energy to launch an attack. Luo Nan suddenly understood something. The mental storm isn't the work of the human-faced arachnid. There's still a powerful person behind. Chapter 150. The mental storm descended again. Unlike the previous EMP-type interference, the mental storm this time obviously increased the suppression of the key targets. Mr. White, Giant Arm, and Crag Burst were the most outstanding and experienced ability users. They became the main targets of the attacks. Mr. White was the most pathetic of them all. Giant Arms and Crag Burst primarily used the power of the material plane. Their coordination of body and soul might not be as perfect as Rui Wen's, but it wasn't difficult for them to reach an outstanding level. They also possessed a certain amount of defensive power with the addition of the chemical carrier. Most of Mr. White's abilities were on the spiritual level. As the saying went, the bird that poked its head out would be shot. Naturally, he was the one who received the most damage, not to mention that he was the temporary commander. Mr. White was already sitting on the ground. His hands were forming a strange seal. He was trying to keep his mind focused. He had lost the ability to speak and give orders. Seeing this, the remaining 7 or 8 ability users could only act according to the plan. They surrounded Mr. Bai in a circle, placing the unconscious Rui Wen in the circle. They held their breaths and focused their minds, putting all their effort into defending. Crag Burst and Giant Arm saw the situation over there from the window. They cried out in their hearts. It was clear that they couldn't count on Mr. White for the time being. Under the impact of the mental storm, even though the two of them possessed astonishing courage and strength, they still needed some time to adapt to the distortion of their 5 senses and 6 senses and the increasing pressure. As a result, whether it was returning to Mr. Bai's aid or Yuan's aid, they were both slower by more than a beat. They could only look on helplessly as Yuan leaped out of the window and slashed down towards the night sky. Luo Nan's soul body floated in the night sky, once again witnessing Yuan's stunning and peerless blade technique. Yuan was a burner, but from what Luo Nan could see with his clairvoyance, she was the only burner he had seen who could completely control and even subdue the format of fire. She used the power of the format of fire, but also abandoned the outer shell of the format of fire to the greatest extent. She added pure power to the blade, completely under the control of her will. She used the power of the material plane to forcibly annihilate targets on the spiritual plane. To her, the format of fire was just a source of power. She had an even stricter set of self-logic to control this power. Perhaps this was the secret behind the astonishing power of her saber technique. Where the blade pointed, the human-faced arachnid, if this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. He didn't dare to take it head-on and dodged with all his might. However, Hiyuain had perfectly utilized the man-faced arachnid's method of hunting down Jack to perfection. Seizing the opportunity, seizing the rhythm. Right when the human-faced arachnid was in the midst of digesting the spiritual seed, a blade came falling down. Half of the arachnid's 4 limbs were chopped off, transforming into smoke. The human-faced arachnid let out a howl of pain. Its body turned incorporeal, and it fled into the sky. Hiyuain tried to adjust her attack, but at this moment, giant arm and crag burst suffered from the mental attack. Their follow-up support was a beat too slow, and the front and back were separated. Her figure was high in the air, and there was practically no room for change. An omen of alarm suddenly rose in Luo Nan's mind. He sent out his telepathic thoughts, "Be careful." Now it could already be seen that the second wave of the spiritual storm was deliberately let go of Hiyuain, so that the forward commander was not on the same rhythm as everyone else. Then, the third wave, which was specifically targeted at Hiyuain, descended. The attack was no longer a mental storm, but a blinding lightning strike from the mental plane. Luo Nan's warning was extremely timely. Though Hiyuain's body was falling rapidly through the air, she placed the blade horizontally in front of her chest. Her body and soul instantly entered a solid and stable rhythm. Clang! The alloy knife in Hiyuain's hand actually let out the sound of metal clashing. The edge of the knife trembled involuntarily, just like Hiyuain's current state of mind. But in the end, she managed to defend herself. But whether it was Luo Nan or Hiyuain herself, neither of them had any intentions of relaxing. The air fluctuated once more. The malevolent human-faced arachnid displayed its characteristic of appearing and disappearing like a ghost. It seized the opportunity and suddenly attacked. It seized the instant when Hiyuain's rhythm of body and soul became chaotic. It coordinated seamlessly with the mysterious expert in the distance. Siege Hammer. The human-faced arachnid's specialization in mental attacks and the Siege Hammer's special methods revealed their might at this moment. The alloy knife rang out again, and the vibrations intensified. Hiyuain's body and soul rhythm, which wasn't too serious at first, were clearly cracked by this Siege Hammer attack. If she wanted to adjust back, she would need at least 1 to 2 seconds. But the human-faced arachnid wouldn't give her this opportunity. It screeched on the mental plane and its 6 heterochromatic eyes flashed in unison. It wanted to seize this opening and seize the greatest victory. Have you had enough? Luo Nan couldn't bear to watch any longer. He sent out telepathic thoughts, which was a signal. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. The demonic body of the arrogant human-faced arachnid suddenly went rigid. Its 6 heterochromatic eyes, which had been glowing with an extraordinary splendor, each color was thrown into chaos. It was at a loss at first, but then it sensed something. It saw the heavily chained crow suddenly appear on the mental plane. It was taut and perfectly straight. One end had sunk deep into the depths of the void, but the other end had connected to its abdomen at an unknown time. It even pierced through. The human-faced arachnid had no way of understanding its current situation, but its instincts were telling it that this situation was extremely, extremely bad. It screeched and its demonic body leaped into the air, wanting to break free from this chain that seemed both real and illusory. However, this only caused the chain to rattle and tremble. The corresponding information passed through the chain and was transmitted back endlessly. This allowed Luo Nan, who was on the other end, to truly feel what the interior of the human-faced arachnid's demonic body was like. It was a deep and turbid furnace of hell. Flames sprayed and the sea of fire churned. The most intuitive feeling one could feel here was the high temperature. Of course, this was just a type of comprehension through the senses. It was hard to imagine that a darksider life form like the human-faced arachnid would contain a furnace of several tens of thousands of degrees within its body. This should be a terrifying power structure that swallowed consciousness and melted the soul. It just appeared in its current form. The chaotic fragments of information and emotions were like overgrown weeds. They scattered along with the gushing flames, occasionally colliding with each other to form a tiny bit of consciousness for a brief moment. Then they screamed miserably within the sea of fire furnace of hell as they melted. The cycle repeated itself. Luo Nan locked onto the spiritual seed that he had just plucked from the depths of Jack's soul in the center of this terrifying furnace of hell. The outer layer of the seed had already melted in this furnace of hell, but that was all. When this outer layer disintegrated and digested, a bit of demonic mottled radiance jumped out from within. It resonated closely with Luo Nan's chain, resisting the fatal flow of fire that existed everywhere. It lit up the strict and standardized format pyramid structure. The tetrahedron, the inscribed sphere, and the circumscribed sphere appeared clearly. It suppressed a small area with its unique structure, giving the bit of mottled radiance time to grow. In the blink of an eye, the demonic mottled radiance rapidly magnified. Its 8 legs spread out and its 6 pupils changed color. Its half-arachnid, half-human body stood stooped out of habit, yet it possessed the cruel tension of pouncing on its prey at any moment. In this way, the human-faced arachnid was the manifestation of the wraith sign. It manifested within the stomach of another human-faced arachnid. Chapter 151. The furnace's inferno was extremely repulsive towards the wraith sign, an outsider. Huge bubbles appeared in the sea of fire, revealing a deep magma-like structure. The flames above the sea of fire were like dancing pythons, roaring as they tried to devour the devil sign. At this time, the furnace of hell didn't seem to be in the stomach of a darksider life form. Instead, it seemed to exist in the center of an enormous world. There was a fantastical feeling of a Mount Sumeru in a mustard seed. Faced with such an environment, the wraith sign was not in a hurry to resist or destroy. What he did was to howl at the sky. His body burned with a blood-colored flame that seemed to be solid, merging with the format pyramid on the outer layer. The unique structure of the format pyramid expanded outwards layer by layer. At the center of the furnace of inferno, lines of different densities shuttled and intersected in the ocean of fire, building one basic structure after another before they were connected into a complicated whole. This scene was so familiar, just like the magical altar in the Dashang building's fighting arena. That was right. The wraith sign had built a new altar. Previously, it was built on the turbid emotions of hundreds of spectators. Now, it was built on the lava. Luo Nan's eyes were still groping in the dark when the last altar was constructed. He was a standard example of knowing the how, but not knowing the why. But as he came into contact with the Tower of Babel, built by the Dynamo Core, and through Jack's selfless demonstration, he understood the structural rules of operating energy and information. In addition, after grasping the soul-breathing technique, he gradually realized the mysteries of the interconnection between the spiritual and the material planes. Now, it seemed that he was a little enlightened. Luo Nan noticed that the structures of the two altars were very similar. They didn't seem to possess essential differences. Especially the operating principles of the two altars. In other words, the method of handling energy and information was exactly the same. From a simple logical deduction, it could be seen that the same form was often rooted in the same content. Since the structure was like that, the basis of its existence should not change too much. Oh, in other words, the foundation behind this furnace of hell is actually similar in nature to the spectators in the arena. It's just that one manifests as a turbid flow of emotions, while the other manifests as a furnace of flames. Luo Nan watched with great interest. The turbid flow that is rooted in the emotions and desires of the human heart can actually develop into different forms and possess different functions. This transformation was caused by the human-faced arachnid. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Is that it, or are there other factors? Luo Nan observed the furnace of hell once more with questions and gains in mind. He felt it to be even more penetrating, and his understanding became even clearer. As the wraith sign continued to build the altar, the giant flame pythons that had been attacking it from the outside gradually stopped attacking it. On the other hand, in the lava below the sea of fire, the bubbles popped one after another. They were clearly distorted human faces, staring at the wraith sign with hatred, fear, and fanaticism. But no matter what, they could not stop the continuous expansion and perfection of the altar structure. Moreover, with the arrangement of the various functional structures, the deterrence of the altar became weaker and weaker. Things were just that interesting. No matter how horrifying and tragic the scene was, when the altar was built, who was the priest, who was the sacrifice, who had the power of a ruler, and who was just a stupid pig or sheep, it would all be clearly distinguished in such a cold and cruel way. The terrifying scene of the furnace of hell continued. Perhaps it did have the powerful ability to swallow consciousness and melt souls, but just based on the level of the altar, it could not pose any threat to the wraith sign on the altar. In other words, the wraith sign had used an altar to suppress the furnace. At the same time, it was stripping away the more essential things of the inferno prison. As the altar was built, the furnace of hell was suppressed. The human-faced arachnid, pierced by the heavily chained crow, grew more and more restless. It even revealed a reaction of fear. It suddenly shrieked, broke through the air, and left in spite of everything. This kind of situation was quite similar to the day when Luo Nan was dragged away by the burning wraith on the warship. The problem was that although only a few days had passed, Luo Nan was no longer an ignorant person. Through the wraith sign, he had a deep understanding of the human-faced arachnid. He did not need to be afraid to face it head-on, let alone now that he had placed Monkey's son in its stomach. Freeze! The heavily chained crow trembled, and the power of the format of "My Heart's a Prison" poured in. The human-faced arachnid had the altar wreaking havoc inside, and the chains were capturing it outside. In addition, it had suffered a blow from He Yueyin, injuring its vitality. Its power of resistance decreased again and again. It had clearly straddled through the air, but it was actually forcefully dragged back by Luo Nan. This wave of noise was far too large. Not only did He Yueyin, who was nearby, feel the abnormality, but the mysterious power in the distance was also terrified and shocked. His mind was scattered quite a bit. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. The most direct effect was that his follow-up killing move aimed at He Yueyin was cut off. She landed safely on the ground and retreated backwards. Giant Arm and Crag Burst broke through the mental suppression one after the other on the abandoned floor. The three joined together in the blink of an eye, and they retreated to where Mr. Bai was. Right now, the members of the Society's defensive circle were in a state of confusion. When the three returned, they scattered and stood apart. They formed a triangular structure around the ring-shaped defensive circle. He Yueyin gave a command in a deep voice. She gave everyone a clear command: reboot the Hexier. Select the local network structure. In the blink of an eye, all the members of the Society completed this step. A psychic wave local network was established. Energy and information were interconnected between the members of the various societies, forming a joint force against the outside world. According to He Yueyin's distribution of authority, she, Giant Arm, and Crag Burst formed the three stable fulcrums of the local network. All energy and information had to pass through these three fulcrums to complete their work. This completely shifted the pressure of the mental storm's attack onto their bodies. Mr. Bai finally obtained a chance to breathe within the local network. He slowly recovered and relied on the deep application of the Hexier to sort out everyone's joint force. He formed a sizable flood of energy and information. It passed Yuan and the other two and buzzed through the suppression of the mental storm. It entered the depths of the boundless night sky and connected with the true psychic wave network in the blink of an eye. The special form of energy and information opened up the Society's special authority on the psychic wave. The warning and distress signals were sent out in the first instance and were received by the Society's managers. The Xia City Ability User Society was completely activated in a short few seconds. What happened? After Luonan grabbed the human-faced arachnid, he hid himself even deeper into the mental plane to avoid the possible retaliation attack of the mysterious power. But the anticipated attack didn't come. Instead, the Hexier, which had been shielded by the mental storm, transmitted a broken message after a series of crackling noises. Members. Confirmed. Interference source. Attack authorization unlocked. All members prepare to attack. In the next moment, the sky of Xia City seemed to light up. The Mid-Autumn Festival is approaching. There are many things to worry about. Please allow me to be lazy. There will be more at around 12 o'clock. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.